decided to listen to the Reality Czars podcast. How brave of you. Nate and Paranoid American may think that they're merely discussing cryptozoology, interdimensional realities, and crude humor. But know this, listening to this podcast puts you on a certain list, the Clinton body count, if you will. The truths they reveal are not for the faint of heart, nor the blissfully ignorant. Listen if you dare, but remember, some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. And now, your hosts, those audacious explorers of forbidden knowledge, the Reality Czars, Nate and Paranoid American.
And we're live. Welcome, everybody. This is the Reality Czars podcast, and I think I'm going to be your only host tonight, Nate. Thomas just texted me, and he's very tired. It's starting to get a little late at night, unfortunately. So he might pop in, he might not. But we're talking to the Beyond Top Secret Texan. Brother, thank you so much for joining us again. You've been on several times, but it's been a minute. Did we figure out it's been like a year?
Been over a year, yeah.
My God, man.
One.
Dude, we've had some pretty epic conversations.
Yeah. That was a time I tried to move too much. But yeah, that's the third we've been speaking to each other. And for the time, so even though I've never had to speak to him on the show, and I remember in the message before we were going, I was all like, "Hey, it's just you and me," and it's just like, and I see and it's like we're all this is I need to take that need to fight. Can't.
Hey Tex, I think we're having some technical difficulties, friend. Your screen is completely frozen and you were sounding pretty robotic. I'm going to, if you can, I'm going to kick you out of here and join back in if possible. Can you hear me? Let's see here. Hey, Tex, are you there, buddy?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, the screen just refreshed. Yes.
Okay, wow. Okay, that's much better. I'm so sorry, dude. I missed the majority of what you said. A lot of that was very robotic talk.
Okay, yeah. Sorry about that. I just transferred reception to a different network, and so yeah. Hopefully this is improved.
Dude, you're coming in completely crystal clear now. Completely crystal clear.
There's a lot of electronic interference with all my interviews, especially lately. The more I strike a nerve and hit closer to the bone when it comes to this podcast of mine and the efforts, is more electronic harassment. So I'm sorry, and I apologize ahead of time. Hopefully this works out. No worries,
brother. We were just talking to I don't know if you're familiar with the gentleman. His name is Ole Damagard, one of the OGs in this community. And as we're talking, I know Ole Damagard is probably one of the most censored people on the internet. And as we're closing and as we're talking and he's going to say this prayer, he always closes in every interview with this like prayer of like love and light to the universe. Like a helicopter is flying over my house and it's just making circles over my house. And I have to just keep constantly, I have to keep my mic muted. And I'm just like, man, this is just absolutely ridiculous, and it just, you start to strike a nerve, And,
I absolutely understand. And the aviation thing that happens in my house is planes from the naval station will fly directly over my house. And what's kind of funny about this is not only will they fly like various platforms, big planes will fly like just about 100 feet over my house, is that they'll do it, almost 24 hours a day. Like there's no rationale or justification. It's 100% they're just buzzing me, and it sounds like World War II sometimes. These like 1940s prop type planes just flying over my house, and I've recorded it. I have it on video where it's literally like if you just step out in your backyard, look up, and there's just these massive planes that's like flying directly over your house, and you don't live like anywhere close to an airport necessarily. It's just like they're literally coming as low as possible and flying to make as much noise and to kind of just like show that they know where you live and are taking the time to harass like, and I've had people parked outside my house for years, and this is nothing new. This is a journey that's taken over 10 years at this point. Remember when I was in the military too, so I know full on like they did everything from like reading my mail to listening into my phone calls. I used to live off base. I lived on base for the various bases I was on for 2 full years, and then lived off base. And they were doing things like sending people to my house and things like that, just to like back then, and just to keep tabs on people. They knew everything. They knew who I talked to, where I went. They followed my car. I've had tails on me and everything, and I absolutely knew electronically I'm being surveilled too. Every device is probably pwned as fuck when it comes to hacking software, keystroke software, and everything. I'm pretty sure, and I know for a fact that what they've also already done is try to blackmail me twice, with like sexually like history and stuff like that, and basically attacking by going through my gallery and talking to all my contacts and stuff like that. And this is all stuff that happened when I was a single man and stuff like that. And this is like over the last 2 or 3 years, since 2022 it really started. That was just, they started just hammering me and everything. But I've been able to walk through it and just walk it off, because it's one of those things where I already know it's going to happen. I'm pretty sure at one point they'll even kill me. And at that point, I don't live to be intimidated or ashamed. There's nothing I do that is. So I wouldn't. The rule of thumb is in the intelligence community is if you're not willing to get blackmailed, never do anything that you're not willing everyone to know. Basically, don't have any secrets. Don't like, even as innocent of the secret as it is, it's not worth having. The idea of compromise and blackmail is 100% real. And if you are going to be, because everyone is as fair game in the intelligence world as it is now, if you're going to be attacked, try to get the honeypot angle, try to get the bribe and all that kind of stuff, because you can see who's taken that and who's done, like, who's accepted the easy way out of it versus who's been absolutely ground down and destroyed and eventually assassinated. And like for me, I've lost the YouTube channel with over 600 videos. I'm completely shadow banned, lost Instagram at over 3,000 followers. TikTok, I have accounts on TikTok that are still there. I can't access TikTok anymore and the app on any of my devices. They know my IP address and they just don't let me. I'm completely basically blocked from TikTok, that are currently having 1 billion views to them. There are videos I posted back then that now currently have 1 billion plus views, UFO evidence, etc., and politics, memes. Completely banned on Facebook, completely banned, a shadow banned on Twitter, even though I almost have 10,000 followers on Twitter, X or whatever they want to call it now. And it's 100% because I don't censor myself. I tell it like it is. And, resoundingly with a lot of accuracy, resoundingly with a lot of vindication, and with a lot of confidence, because I don't follow the trends. I don't follow anyone else's opinion. I'm completely self-educated, but I use my own experience. So I know from just living it what's up, and having seen it. And whether you want to believe me or not, it's the writings on the wall. I've been calling this shit about the Middle East and about Russia and the Ukraine after having my own experience and everything with it since 2010. And that's when I got into it, and it was even 10 years old then. I'm not saying I'm this like salty as fuck guy who's been like, I know it's like I'm only 36 right now, so my history with it comes from basically being born in America, knowing about the news, always seeing it happen, and then eventually, and this is, remember, this is nothing to do with metaphysics or anything, but going through the military lifestyle. I went to Texas A&M University, which has the Corps of Cadets. It's absolutely the Cold War reliquary of, being born in the Cold War and then surviving through the 90s, and then basically being MK Ultra'd and psychologically geared to attacking Islam and Islamic fighters and seeing them as the enemy, right? Which now I absolutely know is completely agenda driven and Zionist occupied driven, etc.
And dude, I mean, I think it goes back even further than that. I mean, because there's evidence to show that like the Catholic Church, like the Pope, basically invented Islam as this existential threat, this existential like enemy to like keep like the Holy Land, and this whole fight between the Christians and the Jews and all this. Like it goes so far back, and it's absolutely wild, man.
Well, see the history, and it's not even like I want to get too much into the history of that, but like the history or the nature of Islam is completely lied about and exploited, and like what we know in the West and what they've told us specifically in America is completely inaccurate. They hold Jesus Christ, they call him Isa, and it's Isa ibn Maryam, and they hold him as the Messiah. They hold him as literally the Son of God who resurrected completely, 100%. And they hold also sacred the books of Moses, and they actually do peacefully coexist with rabbinical and Torah Judaism, right? Torah-based Judaism. It's when the Babylonian Talmud, the Khazarian mafia, and these synagogue of Satan type Pharisees, and this is way back. This is the Babylonian days when Book of Daniel and stuff like that, when they basically hijacked the Aryan Israeli understanding of these terms, and they rewrote the Old Testament, and they included a lot.
Brother, we should do an episode exclusively on this in the future. I know we have another agenda we want to get to, but man, this is like the most fascinating stuff to me.
Exactly. And so like when it comes to it, this is not like its own religion. It's not its own thing. It is Christianity. It is Middle Eastern Orientalism and Christianity, and both Christians in Rome and Muslims in the Middle East went through iconoclasm, which is the destruction of old pagan idols. They were both like geared towards the same conversions. So basically, you're right. Islam is Catholicism in the Middle East and in North Africa by the locals there. And Muhammad was a red-haired Aryan Irishman who was married to a red-haired Italian or French Catholic. And no, 100%. And so the idea that over time it evolves now. So when we see it, Christians are like, "Oh no, you worship the Antichrist. You're the devil. Or basically, you worship Satan. You're Islamic. That's not Christianity." That to get to that outcome is 100 years of Zionist propaganda and the creation of the Christian, what they call dominionism. Yeah, dominionism, which is basically Christian supremacy. But it's like Zionist, like Christian identityism. It's like you have Texans, for example, who are Baptist, Southern Baptist, Christian Protestants who wave Israeli flags and believe that Israel should kill everybody in Palestine. And it's like because it's the Holy Land.
It's a death cult, man. It's an absolute death cult.
But the Christians, but the Christians think that Israel is the ally of Christianity, and Israel, Judaism, this form of Judaism that created Israel, Zionism, is 100% supremacist, racist state, and they believe Christians should be killed. They believe that Christ wasn't the Messiah. If you read the Talmud, Christ was this wizard who's now burning in hell in his own excrement. And that's like the Babylonian Talmud, the Khazarians who created Israel, like say Netanyahu, people who profess that, they all actively hate Jesus Christ and Christians.
Yeah,
and
the majority
in Israel, they steal on the cross. They do things like attack Christian nuns and stuff like that. And you're like, oh
yeah. I mean, you can see videos. Like I saw one just the other night. It was like these like Asian, I think they were like from Indonesia, Christians that were like on a pilgrim type of journey to the Holy Land, and they're carrying a cross, and you see these Jews with the little curls down the thing down there, and they just start spitting on them. They just start spitting on these Christians, and you'll hear things out of their mouths, like spitting on Christians is a Jewish tradition, and
Yep.
things like that. And so, like, what people also don't realize is that the majority of so-called rabbis today in Judaism are basically, I wouldn't even say they're intellectually at least the descendants of Pharisees, because I wouldn't even say genetically they are descendants in any ways to
You
the
get it.
actual
And yeah,
people of
don't even be
Palestine.
afraid.
But
Yeah, don't even be afraid, and we shouldn't even censor ourselves. There's
yeah,
ample evidence. It's not controversial. This is the truth. It's publicized in their own publications. It's I went undercover, and that's because that's how I roll. I learn as much as I can. Know your enemy, and it's not that they're the enemy because of who they are, but it's true and 100%. Like if you read John 8:44 in the KJV, a New Testament, Jews are the children of Satan, and you're wondering why that exists. It's because this has always been this issue in the city of Jerusalem, which is very important for a lot of real reasons, enough for God to send his own son there and say, like, this whole thing. But the fact that's an issue, but they have the Christians hating the Muslims for no reason but this imaginary threat, which is that they will kill Christians and they hate Christians and they hate Jesus and that they cannot coexist Christians, right? Like you should live with the Jews in Israel, and not all Jews. Like I said, the Talmudic Jews, the rabbinical Jews, the Hasidic Jews. If you watch videos too, you can just go on BitChute or Rumble or and watch these videos on any uncensored news outlet of Israeli police getting into disputes, abusing, assaulting Orthodox Jews in Israel. That
yeah,
they were considered a minority who was against the COVID vaccinations. They were against the LGBT reformations. And that what you're seeing is a very complex issue. Like you said, the Pharisees, which says, if you read the New Testament, is exactly the confusing backstory you get, where there is this ruling party of King Herod who are Edomites, and they are not true Jerusalem natives or Israelis or even tribes of Judah or any Judeans. They are a foreign, literally a foreign colonizer, right? People who came and started living there as they said it was their own, and they burned the scrolls of lineage, and they tried to change and reform the old ways, and they basically were only in name only, right? Like that they were this ruling family, and that was the whole idea of tipping over the tables in the second temple. And what they're trying to do is build the third temple. The whole thing is to try to create the third temple in the
yeah,
name of this false Mashiach, which is a secular Mashiach. The Catholic Church is guilty of subscribing to this, as well as the Saudi Arabians. Although the new king of Saudi Arabia, the new prince that's the king of Saudi Arabia, is pretty based, and he's like trying to get away from it. But the wheels are already kind of geared towards it. Like they're trying to build it in Yemen, because the discoveries of, say, Ron Wyatt. Ron Wyatt positions a lot of the Book of Exodus to have occurred more in Saudi Arabia and Yemen rather than the crescent of the Mediterranean. So they kind of just did like a big circle around the Red Sea. But they found, like, a lot of the rock of Aaron, when Aaron cut the rock in half, and like a lot of these monuments down there. But like they want to build the third temple to this new location, which is why they caused the war in Yemen, and were very, very committed, even though they lost. Eventually, they were completely defeated by the Houthi rebels in destroying, literally committing this genocide against the Houthi rebels because of the location's importance towards this plan of creating this new third temple. What's happening now is
man, there is something I need to reread that book. David I came out with a book. I want to say it was like maybe 2 years ago, but he talked about like how the Zionists and the Wahhabis, like the Wahhab, that type of Islam, were like working hand in hand to do all of this crazy shit, and this is all just an elaborate plan. And maybe I'll talk to, because we have David coming back on in, I think, in November. And so maybe I'll discuss that a little bit more with him.
No, it was very
Because
fascinating that you actually had David Icke on the show as your first guest. That was also really cool. Um, yeah, no, I'm saying like that. That's just really fucking awesome that you can have his ear, that you can talk to him and stuff. He's actually right on the money in a lot of things. And for what it's worth, you're 100% correct in repeating that. The Wahhabis and ISIS, the Wahhabi's fate, it is completely artificial. It was 100% facilitated by the SAS and the CIA, the MI6, as well as Mossad and an Israeli secret intelligence service, otherwise known as ISIS. And ISIS is actually such a common name in the intelligence community that it's the secret agency that Archer belongs to in popular culture. Archer was the agent of ISIS. It's one of those things that is just so cliche. It's an acronym, and it's just always used in these espionage intelligence services. And I can get into it as much.
ISIS also being the name of like a mother of heaven, and
Yeah,
also like interchangeable with Mary,
yeah,
in some places. And
yeah. A lot of it is because they have to reveal themselves in the symbolism. They have to basically make it so obvious. And this was the Egyptian Ptolemaic, but then that's what the Israel Zionists actually believe in. They're the people who worship Moloch, and they're the people who worship Baal. And remember, Israel is Isis, Ra, and El. Israel, which is because they're Pharisees. They're from Moses, who is Egyptian in education. And even then, they are not the Canaanites who existed there were serpent worshippers, and those are the
in
people
Israel too, like in their book, it means to struggle against God.
struggle against God. Yeah, well, even then,
Yeah.
like you look at the Old Testament, they don't even. That's the whole history of the Old Testament is their apostate and rebellious nature, which leads them into punishments and disasters based on their own like intentional rebellion against the laws of Moses, and which were handed directly to man from God in Mount Sinai. And so, like Jesus even says, you hold the books of Moses sacred, but you don't even respect the books of Moses. Like, how can you you say like, oh well, it's not kosher to eat, without washing your hands, but you don't even respect the books of Moses. You pick and choose laws that make you seem holier than thou, but the whole idea of the
Well,
Israel
not to
tribes
like
are lost.
really shit on Christians right now, but I love this here too, where like because they're right and wrong in so many different places, but like what you're talking about picking and choosing and stuff, the way that they will attack things like homosexuality, like the modern evangelical church, but then at the same time they're just like, well, if I want to get divorced, I'm gonna get divorced, and or things like, well, they'll talk about like, hey, you can't swear, you can't say curse words, but then at the same time, where do you see them on Sunday? They're like at a buffet and they're like 300 pounds and they're not going to talk about gluttony. Gluttony being like it's just like that whole don't look at the speck in your neighbor's eye when you have
Your
a
own, yeah,
wooden
to
plank.
promote your own. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
your own.
And it's exactly that. Just the idea that of Jesus Christ, just what he says is so watered down and written by Kabbalists and written by occultists itself that anyone like this is not even as I'm saying like this is all I believe in spiritually and this is all it is. I'm just saying that this is what it says directly in when you talk about the nation of Pharisees. They're foreign occupiers. They're foreign occupiers, like the people of Israel are foreigners. They're mostly Europeans, mostly Ukrainians, mostly people of Eastern Europeans descent who were either forced out due to the events of World War II, which was the massive anti Semitism that rose up in Europe because they were doing the same shit over there. They were causing a lot
Yeah,
of
man.
social disintegration. They were causing
We're
the
gonna
Weimar
get some
Republic.
shit for saying this, and we are on YouTube right now, and I don't give a shit. People will talk about like they were kicked out of how many countries? 119 countries or something like
Well, that
that.
could be over history, and that's the thing. Like, I'm not going back into the Crusades, but if you actually wanted to go back into the Crusades, this is where it all started. And like, this has very little to do with what we wanted to talk about war, but yeah, I guess this is what we're talking about now. Is that the Khazarian mafia is a lot of why this bullshit exists because the Khazarians were from the Canaanites who eventually they were not the Phoenicians. They were not the Phoenicians or the Westerners or the Amaru are the people of Israel, are the people who showed up with Moses from Egypt. They were a pre-existing native tribe known as the Phoenicians. They were known as the Philistines or the Judeans, specifically the Judeans. They were in Judea Valley. Why we get the name Jews? Because they were Judeans, and Judah was how they were shorthanded. They would just call themselves the Judean, and that's where like the book of Esther is written, because there was this. Because okay, so the whole Old Testament. Remember, we didn't have anything that survives past what the modern people who control this Khazarian mafia have told us are the histories of their own people. But putting this together, we know that after the events of Daniel, at one point, Jerusalem was founded from Moses and that Exodus, but then Jerusalem fell. It was completely conquered after Israel conquered Judea through intermarriage and through a lot of Game of Thrones type shit. Like a lot of like the King David Saul drama. There's a lot of like, oh, there's an evil like cursed king and he's like jealous of the new lion, and a lot, like I said, like a lot of Game of Thrones type classic stuff of how to form kingdom. And so it's a kingdom history. It has nothing really to do metaphysically. There's no, like, people think the Bible is about stories of God. It's a canonical history of a tribe. And after Jerusalem fell, they were all put into slavery in Babylon. So I was like the whole like Old Testament in like 5 minutes. All of them put into slavery in Babylon, except for the Israelites that fled north, and they became the Europeans. They became basically the Vikings, the Germanic tribes, the Goths, the tribe of Dan. Whole history over that. Everyone knows that by now. Everyone knows that. Oh, Denmark, all that kind of stuff, like the Vikings. It's two Viking, and all these different peoples, but from Israel. That's where the Israelians, they all went, the red-haired Aryans from Ireland and stuff like that, and stuff. They all went north after the Babylonians, who were the Persians, who were this Indo-Aryan group themselves, invaded and took over the country of Judea, the lower kingdom of Judea, and they destroyed Jerusalem. They took it over for themselves. Destroyed the first temple, right? Took the Ark of the Covenant, lost it, right? Basically, like hid it. That's the whole thing. That's the whole Ark of the Covenant saga. But then Daniel survived long enough to see that the people are released, and after like 70 years, the people are released. But they didn't really change their ways. They were more Babylonian at this time. They had fully assimilated into the Babylonian church. They were Chaldeans. They even say Daniel was raised basically by wizards of the Babylonian court to be a wizard, to be a soothsayer and stuff. So even while he there were like 4 people who did, and those 4 people are mentioned by name. It's like there's only like a handful of people who even like remembered what the old world was, like the old kingdoms and the old tribes. And they became the second temple. And the second temple was so corrupt, that's the prophecy when Jesus had to come back.
And, I mean, even think about the first temple being built by Solomon and being built by demons and him controlling it through the ring. This like, and people don't even like how far that goes back, where you're talking about like wizards and things. I think about that story with Moses and like the old stories with Moses, where he is confronting Pharaoh, and he's being confronted by his wizards, right? And so they all do these same tricks where he like casts his staff down and it becomes a snake, and they go, and they do the same thing, and then he does this other thing and they do the same thing, and they do this. It's all talking about this ancient world, and they're talking about these ancient powers. They're talking about these ancient religions. They're talking about this sorcery that was just commonplace.
And this idea of snake worship and serpent worship, which is repeated in the Exodus multiple times. The snakes come to copper serpents, and Aaron picks them up on the rod, and they say, bow to the serpent, which will represent the slain Messiah. And it's basically the Aaron's rod. It forms on the crucifix. That's a whole thing. It's not my symbology. You can just look it up. It's esoteric. Yeah, it's Gnostic, but it's actually Old Testamentic, and it's Hebrew. And that's
and then the bird eating the snake, right? And that was the conversion and takeover. That whole symbolism of like the eagle eating the snake, and the whole symbolism of the Catholic Church being that eagle, that fasci, that whole fascist symbol of the eagle, and them kicking the snakes out of of Ireland, right? That whole idea
The
of the
war
snake
between the serpent cults and the
and the
Israeli and
eagle cults. Yeah.
yeah, and the Hebrews, the sun worshippers who worshipped eagles, Helios, because they flew high. And then you have the owl cults and you have spider cults. It's like it's not a binary where there's only two. And yes, in this case, in the Old Testament's case, yeah, there was only two really. And when you think of it, it's a very limited scope. But yeah, we know that there's a multipolarities of these different, uh, basically these totems that represent like the 12 tribes of Israel. There's 12 tribes. Many people can't count them. Many people can't say them out loud and what they are. Apparently, Mexicans are the tribe of Issachar. 100%. Just Google that tribe of Issachar. You'll pull up a lot of Aztec and Mayan iconography and people who are like Jehovah's Witnesses in Mexico who just basically say that they're the tribe of Israel, like Hebrews, and they came over on arks. And then you got the Mormons who think that Jesus Christ came to just America and did the whole thing of saving the world and salvation in
And then,
America.
dude, you have the Church of England and you have the British that say that they are also the real Jews, and they'll tell you that they're also like the royal family will tell you that they're related to Muhammad.
No, and that's what well, basically to draw this all full circle. The whole reason we were talking about the Old Testament is that's the 100% is that when you break it down, it's all a continuation of this thing, but there is one imposter element, and that begins in the Khazarian Ukrainian steppes with this tribe of Judea that was Canaanite, that was originally Canaanite. And if you look in the Old Testament, there's a lot of like schizophrenic type of verses because they like you can't really understand why God is at war with Canaanites, and at the same time Canaanites are basically in bed with the Israelis and all that, and because it's the idea of they're not Hebrews, they're this thing called Jews. They're not Hebrews of Moses in the 400 years of Goshen and the tribes of Egypt and let my people go who are the chosen people by Yahweh and all that, the Yeshua. That's Hebrew, and those people are put into diaspora. They're put into diaspora. They belong in a nation only of faith, a nation only of cultural identity, of not of borders and our governments, our armies. And that's why you see a divide now, a modern divide. And for years, there was no Israel. There was just a Palestine. And for years, the Rothschilds and Zionists, who were this type of Khazarian fake imposter banker, typically banker class. Typically, if you look in, say, the Spanish Empire, they were 100% the bankers and the lawyers. And when the Spanish Empire had enough of their extortions and their corruptions, kicked them all out. And that's what they say collapsed the Spanish empires because they didn't have, they were just basically trading full gold bars for like horse saddles. Like they didn't have like the subtlety of debt and things like that. But they really didn't. What knocked out the Spanish Empire was just entropy and time. They lasted for like 600, 700 years. Teddy Roosevelt fought them. And that was they were Cuba. That's what I'm saying. Like at some point, man, you just got to call it a day. Like how long of it? Like, do you think America in 600 years is gonna fucking matter? No, it's not. It's gonna be like the Spanish Empire. It's gonna be guys who wave flags and they have no loyalty to. And if they were actually under gunfire, would just abandon ship because it's like a 600-year-old thing. Like exactly, like it's just it over time. That's what happened to Rome. Over time, you lose the motivation to keep going, and you just become something else. You evolve. Technologies change, politics change, people change, and really, not like, the more it changes, the more it stays the same. The
So
Spanish
Tex,
became British. The Spanish
Tex,
became the
I got a
British.
question for you, brother. So it seems like there is where I get confused with this whole thing, and like, man, I have my own theories and I try to go deep in this, but like, so it seems like there is the majority of, I guess you would call Abrahamic religions, call this specific area very vitally important, right? And so then you have this group that I don't even know what to call them. Are they Jews? Are they Hebrews? Are they Palestinians? There was a group of chosen people that was maybe there, and then how and where and why? So the Khazarians somehow get involved, and how did they accumulate so much power? Because they are from this area. They're from this area that is. That is very near. They're these tribal folks that are by the the Kievan Rus, right? The Kievan Rus are these Vikings that came over and took over this uh, chunk of land that is now in where Ukraine is. But there was also a tribe called the Khazarians that were very powerful. And so, how and where? How do they choose Judaism? How, like, why do they choose Judaism? How do they make this like cultural like? How do they become so damn powerful too? That's so fascinating to me. This tribe of like barbarians, basically the Khazarians, that have just really just um, consolidated so much power.
Good question. And the good point of that question, you kind of answered it itself, is that their uncouth nature and their reality of basically being a nomadic, stateless society affords them their survival, and it always has. The Khazarians, like I said, the Kiev Rus, which were like basically your steep type of Scythians and your horsemen, these big rough armies of the Horde. They called them like Attila the Hun, like the Horde. These basically Thracians, Dacians, Armenians, all these people who basically lived in just like the open grass fields, and they were fighters, they were fierce. The Khazarians were the people who ruled them with intelligence, with organization, with astronomy, with knowing about crop cycles. They are the ones who kept the books. Literally, as cliche as that sounds, they're the ones who just read and wrote everything down and kept family history, and that's extremely important to a society.
And something that I've heard specifically about the Khazarians as well is that they were adopters of culture. So like when they would meet a more powerful culture, they would like kind of pick and choose, and they would adopt that and make that part of their culture. They would take things. It was like this group. Sorry, go for it.
Oh, they've been enslaved already in their history. They've been enslaved. Their cities have been ravaged and destroyed. By this time, Rome has already destroyed Jerusalem. They've already tried the rebellion and lost it. They don't have that capital city, but they have the dream of going back. And yeah, they forced themselves up north where Anatolia is, above that, because of all the other pre-existing tribes. But to survive, how they became so powerful, it starts with the desperation at their lowest point, right? At the lowest point, what people forget, that there is a lot more to history than what they tell you, ABC. So there's this whole phenomenon of Lithuania and Poland, who were pagans, who were pagan Vikings, like I said, the Kiev Rus, and they had this huge empire, most of all of Europe, from Baltic Ocean all the way to the Black Sea. And then when the Vikings started to Christianize in the European area in the north, they started becoming Christians and actually Muslims. Vikings have rings dating back to the 800 AD where it says Allah inscribed. And they try to say, oh, it's trading. They were merchants. Watch 13th Warrior. They were completely on board with that shit. The Muslims helped them to Christianity because they were the ones who were telling them that Christians are warriors. Monotheism is about warriors, about being Abraham, is about fighting evil. And the Vikings were like, so you have this threat from Europe, right? Coming down and pushing into this big pagan empire. The pagans themselves are killing each other. Like they have this, and it lasts for like 500 years in its own right. The Catholics are sending 9 armies into Transylvania, into Bohemia. The Transylvania thing is going on. The Turks are coming from the south. The Muslims are coming from the south, and the Arabic, and they're kicking a lot of ass. That's when you have the Dracula stories. That's when you have the Dracula type events. And I have 2 things to say about this, so let me get through the Dracula thing. That's when he converted to Christianity, is because he was taken and kidnapped by Muslims. And that was when he basically became like, we're going to fight Muslims, but we have to convert to Christianity. But they were completely Satanists. They were completely black magic, Khazarian. And the reason why they're so powerful, their barbaric nature and their ancient pagan blood ritual sacrifices provides them a lot of terror. They're extremely brutal people, to the point that they are psychotic. A thing with like Ashkenazis is that there's schizophrenia that runs in their DNA at a higher percentage. And
I wish Thomas was here right now, because there's connections with schizophrenia into adrenochrome.
Yeah,
because
blood ritual. Yep.
blood rituals, yes, into all of that, into MK Ultra. It all connects. It's
But
really
they were going to get annihilated for these practices. These practices are that and their sex habits, they're all incestual, pedophilic, they're homosexuals. I remember this is the idea when Catholics were like killing homosexuals, and the Muslims, of course, they're not cool with that shit because of the Abrahamic thing. But the Jews are going to be killed. Like the Khazarians are going to be killed. They're not Hebrews, but they lie because they
because
know
it was never a true conversion.
well,
Like these
they know
specific Khazarians, yeah.
they know they can convert to Christianity because the Catholics just want to convert them. The Muslims want to kill them, but they know that they can convert to Christianity and become a vessel state, use their power for what it's worth for the Catholics. And there's a lot of betrayal. There's a lot of stuff like that, like when Vlad Dracula invited the Catholic bishops and he killed one of them and had him tortured to death in the next room and was eating dinner with the Catholic bishop as the guy was screaming, for mercy and stuff, just to get his point across that, this is the idea of like who's going to be. But the Catholics, eventually would integrate them, the Khazarians, into their society at first, and that's who became the banking class. These they became what they called conversos. In Spain, they call them conversos. They're Jews who converted to Catholicism. A lot of Spanish Inquisition shit was because these people were still practicing their witchcraft, their satanic. It's just basically Babylonian, Khazarian Judaism, and I mean that from the Valley of Judea. Everyone's like, "Oh, can't say Jew."
People also have to understand is the term. So yeah. Dracula was actually it was a name given down. So Drac or Drake was the dragon. Was the dragon, and so that was actually like a term that was given to them because they were like fighters for the Christian faith. Yep. They were fighting the Muslims, and so that was like a title given to them. And Dracula means son of the dragon, so that he was the son of the dragon. And
remember what's going on at this time too is when you have the conversos, these bloodthirsty, evil, for lack of a better word, new Christians. They're only Christian in name only, and they're the satanic army, a mafia, basically a shadow force, right? Like basically the Christian has gone to the dark side. The Knights Templar get destroyed. The Knights Templar get purged from existence because the French become so basically converted by these evil wizards, and the evil wizards are like, yeah, the Knights Templar, the people who really save Christians and like fight people in Jerusalem, we want Jerusalem. Kill the Knights Templar, give us Jerusalem. And so they do, and they become literally like the Draco. There's this whole secret society. But what's funny about all this? You asked how they get modern power, and they track it just to the lines. That's the medieval Renaissance era, and then now modern era. Prince Charles can trace his DNA back, and you look this up, to Vlad Dracula.
He absolutely can. To
the British
Muhammad.
Yeah.
And to Vlad Dracula.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. Both of those, which is absolutely fascinating. The supposedly British royal family were actually Germans.
Yep.
Can trace their blood back to Dracula. And they also like to say that they can trace their blood back to Jesus, which is also fascinating.
The Merovingi, the French like to say that a lot. The French are totally into that. That oh yes, Mary came to France, and we had families and ruling dynasties and shadow kings, and Charlemagne was the true Roman emperor and stuff like that.
Tex, there's something that you talked about that I wanted to that I just wanted to like touch back on. You were talking about how there are some like Celtic and even Swedish things that have like ancient 1,400-year-old sword that has Arabic writing on it, and people go, "How the fuck?" And somebody, I got to give a shout out to Andreas Exertus. He had on Michael. Man, I can't think of his name right now, but he's a British dude. Really good researcher, wrote a lot of books. It's good. I'll try to put it in the show notes if I remember, but I'm terrible at that. But I will attempt it. Michael Ewing Jr. Michael. So he has this whole theory, and he's wrote books, and he has insane evidence that like basically like so the religion that is now known as Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and I've talked to I've let some Orthodox brothers that have kind of talked about this too. The history of this is like there was one religion, and it was called the Way. So it was this one religion that was before it splintered and broke into all this different things. The Orthodox Church was the Catholic Church, was the Jews, was the Muslims, it was a group, and it was called the Way. And you hear the language that they talk about that like was spoken, that Jesus spoke was Arabic. It was just another dialect of Arabic, and that all of these languages uh, um, were Arabic. And like there was one like when people want to talk about like Tartaria, when they want to talk about this ancient one powerful empire, it actually was this group or whatever it was. It was an Arabic, Tartarian, Khazarian weird group that was in charge. That like so like because if you even look at somewhere like at the time of so people are gonna just yell at me because like I'm not very good at like I'm not very good at like my thoughts. I'm not very good at like verbalizing them. But like at the time of Napoleon, do you know there was like less than 10% of France spoke French?
Yes.
Like
The whole history of France.
The whole history of like Europe is fake and gay, man. They're lying to us because it's like you can find fucking coins in Ireland that are like 1,200 years old, and they have fucking Arabic on them, and they say there's one true God, Allah. And you're like, what the fuck is that about? And they're like, oh, well, people were just trading. And you're like, no, everybody was following one religion. It was called the Way. Everyone spoke one language, and it was Arabic. Like people don't want to know that, but like there's this weird fucking history that is actually being like probably hidden by the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is really hiding it because, man, if anybody fucking knew that like Arabic was maybe arithmetic, Arabic, like my God, man.
A lot of it, what people don't want to know is that, like, see, and this is the thing, like, it's a history thing, and I don't want to take too much time because I remember we were going to talk about military events and stuff like that going on, what's going to be projected in the future. But this is the way to explain it. But even I hold to some unorthodox views, especially about Jesus Christ. I believe Jesus Christ was actually Julius Caesar, who actually became
who might have been Muhammad, who also might have been.
I'm not saying as an avatar. I'm saying like in timeline wise.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, dude. I'm saying the same thing.
Oh yeah, and even
we might have different views, but yeah, no, I agree with you, dude.
You're right. There's okay. So the idea of like what happened was there's a thing called apotheosis, and apotheosis is type of Egyptian magic, and it happens in Gaza, or at least in the Valley of the Kings, in some Luxor somewhere, right in Egypt, and Alexander the Great. This is ancient history, and like this is not my specialization. I really, I don't mind if some historian goes and proves me wrong or whatever, because the idea that history itself is fake and gay and stuff. So, like I said, I have some history professor.
The whole idea of history. How is he going to prove you wrong by another book that somebody else wrote that was words that somebody else said 1,000 years ago that we have to believe because the Catholic Church said? Like, to me, history, like I listen to the news right now, and the narrative they're telling me is a lie. I know for a fact that they're telling me that January 6th was this great insurrection, that holy shit is worse than 9/11, that and then all I know is that it's actually a bunch of hillbillies that maybe showed up, but mostly it was led by feds that were kind of led inside of there. And then there was also like cops that were like, hey, stay in the velvet lines. Hey, I'll open the door for you. In fact, here's the key. I have it in my pocket. I'll unlock it. Here you go. And there, it's fucking silly. But like the narrative that we're going to hear is that it was this wild thing. So if you have kids in school and like 10 years from now, that's what they're going to be taught. That's what they're going to be taught is history. History, It's a fucking story. It's a narrative, and it's always been written by the victors. It's always been written by the people that are in charge. And holy shit.
Yeah. And
so the idea that somebody's going to prove you wrong, okay, buddy.
Like, we're all entitled to our own opinion. It's America, and that's what makes America great. And that's the thing, we're all like coming to these conclusions, and I think a lot of them have more in common than otherwise. But there's a theory that I've heard, and I hold to it. Like, it's a process that happened in Egypt, and it happened with a lot of the pharaohs and stuff. But like, what happened is Jesus Christ, who was Julius Caesar before Jesus Christ. Remember, Jesus Christ means Jesus the Anointed. And so that whole name too, and the whole idea of like, there's so much mystery in his background.
Cristo, that whole idea of Krishna, that whole idea of like Christ is actually maybe
a consciousness, like a type
consciousness, but also like a Christ is like it's like a title given, and so there's been numerous Christs, but there maybe Jesus has been the only Jesus, but he was Jesus Christ. And that there was multiple Christs, but he was Jesus. Anyway, we can go down a million rabbit holes. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I remember the whole Bible, what we call the King James version of the Bible, was written by these Khazarian Freemasons, Protestants, who were basically, they even admit that there were several converted Jews who did the translation of the ancient Greek and Aramaic. And while they say like, oh, this is the most accurate translation, King James was a Catholic, or crypto-Catholic. He was a homosexual. He was in the Freemasons. He had all the names of Jehovah and the true names of God changed to Lord, because he was the Lord, King of England. And so he had the whole thing rewritten with Kabbalistic and numerology. So if you read a King James version, or especially
people also don't know he wrote a fucking book about demons. He wrote the first like crazy book, like this guy that we think is like, oh, he's fucking King James and he wrote this Bible and we need to fucking take this as the word of God, and this is the most important book, and this is the only version that you're supposed to listen to. And you're like, okay, he also wrote a book about demonology. Should we what should we do with that?
Oh no, he's absolutely like King Solomon level weird when you actually think about like the stuff goes hand in hand. That's the whole Christian universe. But the whole Christian universe has this Khazarian influence, which like King of Solomon, their whole history is dealing with demons, the jinn, the Goetia, the fallen angels. That's who they're loyal to, and that's where their expertise comes from. You asked where they get power from, right? And to answer that question, I can tie it in with two basic unique figures. John Dee, who controlled the Queen Elizabeth and the whole idea of this British
the Enochians.
The whole British Empire was the brainchild of John Dee, who was channeling these basically Enochian or angel languages. That's all Khazarian practice. That's all the Chaldean. That's all that Babylonian stuff in England, right? So you have Babylon again risen in London, Babylondon, right? You have this is completely. And the second modern person begins, like you said, in Napoleon, begins in Waterloo, begins with the Rothschilds. And the Rothschilds bring the money. And remember, and this is the thing that people don't know. If you want to read a book about it, Robert Sepper, 1666, Redemption Through Sin, the Frankian Sabbatists, there were rabbis in 1666 who professed to be the second coming of the Antichrist, and who said that their teachings were 100% the opposite of Christ. And they were so popular that they were given basically carte blanche control of entire kingdoms and families. Women, this is like where spiritually like Rasputin shit comes from. These like hypersexual, 100% hedonistic, but like satanic, like literally like just like in America, these satanic witch warlocks and stuff have complete control over the upper elite societies. Rothschild, being a banker and also a Khazarian Jew, famously created Israel with British backing and complete the British control of the empire. Rothschild has said in a video, my family created Israel. Look at the letterwork. There are British explorers and colonists and colonial leaders saying, oh yeah, there's Palestine. It's perfect for the Zionist cause. But this isn't alone. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. Rothschild and his Khazarians in Europe are not just rubbing their hands together and thinking about all the shekels they're going to make. Albert Pike, the Freemasonic leader from Alabama, fucking Bama. Remember, Alabama, brilliant mind, read the Zohar, was a Kabbalistic Babylonian Talmudist, but he lived in fucking Alabama, and he was 100% why America is the reason why it is today is completely controlled by Freemasons. He was the Grand Master of the Scottish Rite Freemasons, which Scottish Rite, King James, 100%. He was writing about World War III happening involving the Zionists and the Muslims, the Islamic world, to create the new world order that would arise of Luciferians. And those Luciferians would be controlled by the Freemasons, who are Luciferians, who are the ruling Luciferian type society. And even in them, there's divisions and stuff like that. But the idea of the Catholic Church now, these Khazarians, all Luciferians, how they're so powerful, where they get their money, Rothschild, the British Empire, the history of the Western world and colonialism. You people don't even think about it. That when the British were exploiting Africa or the Boer War, when the Boer War was going on, that 100 years later this would be replicated in Gaza with Israel by the British controlled avatar. You talk about avatars, you talk about this idea between religious figures. States and nations have avatars. And that's the reason why I think that the Catholic, like you said, go back to like the idea of Jesus Christ being Julius Caesar, suffering through apotheosis, why there's the Holy Roman Empire. It's because that there's no coincidence that Jesus Christ lived during the same time Julius Caesar did, and Julius Caesar professed himself a god on earth as Jesus Christ professed himself the Son of God. They are one and the same. Julius Caesar just went to Jerusalem because the biggest problem was the Jewish Khazarian cult that had a power headquarters in Jerusalem. And he knew that they would kill him. They would murder him for what he was doing, which was destroying any legacy of legitimacy this imposter cult had, because he had the ability to resurrect himself due to this not only divine birth and mandate, but also the Egyptian magic, which is the same Egyptian magic that Moses had, and the Egyptian sorcerers also had, by the way, that apparently was learnable in the high court, and they were throwing and transmuting staffs into serpents and snakes. They were giving life and animation to inanimate objects. They could easily raise themselves from the dead. Jesus Christ, back in the New Testament, is telling his disciples how to raise the dead and how to heal the sick, and sending them forth and being like, yeah, just do it. Like, yeah, you're loyal to me. I'll give you the secret. Go forth. And many of the miracles that are even attributed to Jesus Christ are erroneously attributed. They're actually his apostles and his disciples who went forth and healed the blind and the maimed and stuff. That's the kind of stuff they want to cover up, is this idea of this actual living magic, this living magic.
Well, you're right, because they'll say that, and I actually, because I come from a religious background, I come from a Christian background. They'll say that these things are done in his name, right? Exactly. And so they'll say, and then a quote attributed to Jesus was something like, "These miracles that you've seen me do, you will do even mightier miracles, and you will do it in my name."
Exactly. Well, the idea of it being completely endorsed 100%, and Christians know this. Being a Southern Texan, being completely like I said, a Baptist and all that, be healed, laid hands. You know, the idea of Christianity, true Christianity, is a living, organic dynamism. It is way weirder and more physically incarnated than just people reading and being like, "Oh, this verse says this." Oh, well,
you know what's wild, Tex, is I've seen miracles done in the name of Jesus.
Yes, 100%. No, I am a believer in Jesus Christ on a fundamental level, which is also why I am pursuing, researching, and converting into Islam, because even after knowing that Islam is controlled by all this, everything it's 100% more controlled, but they at least adhere to the idea of faith, and that above all, God is great, and through God the miracles occur. Christians, by and large, do not officially endorse Jesus or miracles. The Catholic Church,
they do, though, brother.
Now, here's the thing. I'm not saying that they're enemies. No, that's the thing. Like the idea of Muslims being like, and because of that, all Christian. No, we're friends. Like, there are pictures I post on Instagram of Palestinian Hezbollah or Lebanese Hezbollah fighters saluting and setting up pictures of the Virgin Mary, of Jesus
Well,
Christ,
see, brother,
of
that's
worshiping
what I was
together.
gonna say is that like
Yeah.
I don't think you have to convert to Islam. Like, because where I'm at, I'll just tell you where I'm at personally in my own spiritual journey is because I grew up very Protestant Christian. I was actually the opposite of a Baptist. I was a man, what do you call that? I was a Pentecostal. I grew up as a Pentecostal. I grew up in these like tent revivals. I was my mom taught me to cast out demons from the time I could walk, basically. And we were praying in tongues. And actually, tonight I probably have to start writing my sermon because I actually am going to be preaching at a church here pretty soon. Uh, uh, but I tell you that to me, I call myself a Christ follower at this point. I try to say that I don't agree with churchianity. So I stay out of the whole idea of whatever Rome says, whatever the Vatican says, not even necessarily what any particular church says. I have my heart with what I find as the creator. So like I think that you can absolutely find that in a Muslim church. I think you could find that in a Catholic church. I think you could find that at an evangelical church. I think you can find that in the Southern Baptist church. You just have to find that faith. You have to find that connection with the Godhead, which is inside you, which is Jesus Christ, that is that part of the Holy Spirit, right? That he,
Yeah.
like the whole idea of the Holy Spirit is like, hey, I have to go away. I have to go to the Father right now, but I'm leaving a piece of myself in every single one of you. That is the Godhead inside of you, that Holy Spirit, which is that whole idea. So to me, like those miracles in Jesus' name, like you could, I guess a Muslim could do it. I assume it would be hard for a Jew to do it because they don't take Jesus as the Messiah, as the Christ.
And you see that there is more common, even though that there is programming and there's a lot of fear just to the name of it. 100%, if you actually look at it, there's no difference between Muslim and Christianity. It's in fact not even the spirit of Christ, it's the God existent in the universe that still lives, the one true living God, the monotheistic God, Allah, Jehovah. Sometimes you call him God. The idea that just it's God, it's Adonai, it's the Lord, it's the Shekinah glory of God, if you want to use the Southern Baptist way of talking about the Shekinah glory, right? Yeshima is what the Torah
Brother,
and Jude
did
talk
you
about.
grow up in the Southern Baptist Church? Is that your background?
No, I'm just a very, very educated person when it comes to this, and I don't see that the idea of hostility closes one's mind, but a mind is like a parachute; it only works if it's open. And even though I stand before you today and talk about this, this is not the only road I've traveled, and I've traveled even very darker roads in my days as a traveler. The idea, though, is that I'm a
Same.
cosmopolitan. I'm a man of like this, and this is nothing. I feel like this is so like out there and extraordinary and now edgy, but it's not trying to be. It's actually very classical. It's very 20th century. It's very actually 19th century. And if you think about things like the greatest intellectuals, the greatest occultists were like Europeans who, but they also studied the Rigvedas. They studied Rumis, the Zohar. They studied Talmudism. They studied occultism, Kabbalahism. They studied all this, but not necessarily like saying that this is all good. Obviously, I'm 100%. I have found my enemies in the occult tradition. That's Talmudism and Satanism, and this extreme idea of like Odinism and neo-paganism. But I have read them. I have read them and watched their literature and watched their propaganda films and watched their ways. I have studied them from all angles. I have worn, like say with Judaism. I studied Hebrewism. I studied the whole idea of like the Rev Sefer Yetzirah, and I said this is not something I want to talk about in this episode, but 100% like communism and capitalism. You can't just say all I want to hear is one and exclude the other, and because this is what they want you to think.
One
The
can't
society had a war.
exist without the other,
Well, no,
which
it's
is
not even
so
that.
fascinating to me because they exist in these because the whole idea of like, well, what capitalism is now
Well, they're not
cannot
different.
exist without the idea of communism, and communism can't exist without the existence of capitalism.
Well, they're not different. And see, that's the thing. Like, once you start looking at it from different angles, and I'm not saying like, oh, like I'm so clever, but this is one of the things. Like when you actually look at what the knowledge is there, and why I say having an open mind is the most important thing, is because you're going to get through the programming. And remember, I'm somebody who's actively been through like I say, almost all sides of this angle. And what I can say after coming through it is that they've politicized everything, they've weaponized everything. And what's going to happen inevitably is a massive civil war based on so many ideologies, mistakenly thinking every other ideology is incompatible to coexisting peacefully with it. Now, my ultimate agenda and philosophy to everything is saying that human beings are civil, human beings are polite, human beings want the best for everybody and just want to get along regardless of how different and what they have to tolerate. They have an extremely high patience and really just wish for peace. The average person is not a killer. The average person is not a savage monster. The ideas that we were led to believe from hundreds of years ago, social Darwinism, life is brutal, nasty, and short. Man is just a caveman, and if you didn't have society and law and weapons and like religion, he would just be walking around like, "What's for dinner? Rape. I'm gonna boop," and like to hit a woman and grab her by the hair and drag her back to the cave. That's not how. And that's the thing. They want you to think that if the army or the Pentagon or Homeland Security, the FBI didn't exist, or the ATF didn't exist, we just be running around fucking like maniacs, like the purge, just like people with machine guns off the back of trucks. But what they're doing is engineering just that. They want that
Yes,
Walking Dead reality. They want
they
that
want
Mad
that.
future
Yeah,
because
brother.
they
I
have
mean,
nuclear
you're
weapons.
preaching to the choir here, man. I
Yeah,
think about it so much, like the whole idea of Darwinism and the whole idea of just like this. We were monkeys, and then we became these beings now, and that we have to think about like we have always been. To me, this world is something created for us. That if we weren't here, this wouldn't exist. I almost feel like that we are spiritual beings inside of these flesh suits, and that whatever the spirit is that we are the architects that keep this place in existence. Like this world doesn't exist without us.
yeah, and
This sounds crazy, but like I love the idea of you're just well, you're straw man of the caveman, which has always been sold to us. This is what the caveman was like, just like smack on the head with a fucking rock and be like, "You're my wife now." That whole idea. But like we have always been who we are now, and just like because when did we? Just their whole narrative of the chicken and the egg, like uh,
yeah.
and our just our evolution of thought. When did we become who we are now, and why do we think that we were so much dumber then than we are now? And they try to tell us this, that we were so fucking stupid that there's no way we had the complexity of thought.
Exactly. Without them, without our masters that have been always pushing us to these disastrous wars and these fucked up political situations, what they say are inevitable, but in reality, when you think about it, are really just the machinations of these secret societies, of these groups that have these supremacist, typically racially supremacist, but ultimately spiritually supremacist, like you said, spirit. And it's good that we talked about that for the hour before, because it's that you need that kind of understanding of the history of the world, not the lie of the world, because like the situation right now in Israel, Palestine has based on a lie. They are lying 100% the time about the situation. They want you to believe that 100% this was ordained by all these Abrahamic religions. They want you to believe in Abrahamic religion because this is the only way this shit works. They themselves don't believe in it because they think they're chosen people who can, in their very life, just do whatever the fuck they want. And like, and this is going to piss off a lot of people, swing a fucking chicken and get their sins transferred over, they're fine, right? And this is not in anything having to do with the Abrahamic Lord, Hebrews, anything like that's what I'm saying. You can differentiate the two kinds of people between this type of like fake and real, authentic, like fearing God, following the commandments, and everybody, because no one would ever do this. Create Israel, create the violent, racist, apartheid terror state. I have said this so many times watching the news and this week and everything. Israel, by the UN, by the United Nations own decree, by Amnesty International, by all these Human Rights Watch official decrees, by South American, by various different nation standards, according to China and everything like that. This is like now, see, this is first world type nations. Israel is a racist apartheid state. It is 100% built on a genocide. It is built on an invasion. It was sold to people repatriating after the Holocaust. After all this
idea,
reality, it was Nazis who were.
This was all constructed. So this was all constructed by a group of folks around like I'm not good at dates, but around the 1870s and a little bit before then, when they're writing the Schofield Bible, they're constructing this idea of like Zionism, and it's the psychopaths that wanted they wanted, I guess, like territory, and so they constructed this idea of like a homeland and this idea of like we need to return to this place. And to me, dude, it's so fascinating the way that they wrote this idea of like this right to return to this place that they never inhabited.
Never. Well, they inhabited in this idea of Jerusalem being in Judea, which like we've talked about, like they inhabited. It was, like I said, this Khazarian group. This Khazarian group ideologically can trace their ancestry back to Jerusalem when it was Judea, before it was built.
Ideologically, and see, that's what I mentioned earlier when I was saying like genetically maybe they can't, but ideologically they can. Where it's this idea of this group that ideologically can claim that like, hey, our people live in this specific region thousands of years ago, and so therefore this justifies us coming back. And dude, this whole massive psyop that they did on the Christian American church, where they like where I was mentioning the Schofield Bible and Christian Zionism and this whole indoctrination and them using like the whole thing idea of weaponizing eschatology and like end time prophecy to then like convince these Christians that if they don't support this group of invaders, these occupiers in this territory, where these people literally, they can tell you like, look, I came from Germany, I came from Ukraine, I came from Lithuania, I came from Russia, I came from France, I came from Spain, all these European people, and then they flood this area that has been called Palestine for at least 1,000 years by the Roman Empire, and they say like, hey, we're going to buy this from your Ottoman occupiers. And so they buy this territory from the Ottoman occupiers. That these Ottomans that haven't even been living in this area, they've been living in the Sinai, they've been living in like the Saudi Arabian Peninsula and things like that. Like this whole idea of like Lockean property rights, it's actually the people that have been living and toiling on this land that grew those olive trees. They can say, I put that tree, my great grandfather planted that olive tree, and now we just have this undying allegiance to this group of occupiers because of this indoctrination, because it's this whole wild fucking death cult that is Christian American Zionism, that we think that we have to support these we mentioned the Rothschilds earlier. The Rothschilds are the ones that poured money into this, and that like poured money into also the British government, which has also been part of this the entire time. Like shout out to the Balfour Declaration, where they said like, why the fuck does England get to say, therefore you get a state? Because like because Israel will say like, hey, we have our justification. Look, the Balfour Declaration says that we can be the state of Israel. Like, why the fuck does England get to say you get to be a nation in this area that you're occupying, that you're not from, that you're stealing from these people that have been living here for thousands of years? God damn, it's a fucking wild, hot mess.
One of the things that people think is that Israel is in control, but Israel is not in control. What is really going on? I mean,
It's
now
a
it has a lot
small
of
group of
people.
psychopaths
Zionists are.
that
Zionists
that are international, that don't give a fuck about anything. They like, because people think it's Jews that run the world. No, I don't know what you want to call these people. It's a very small cartel of psychopaths that own the world, that will call themselves Jewish, or that will call themselves Anglo-Saxons if they need to, that will call themselves anything that they want to be at the time to make themselves powerful. And it's just these small like intermarrying families that are actually in charge of the world, that at any time they will claim to be whatever they need to at the time, that are in charge. Because, man, if you look at the state of Israel right now, dude, is whether or not there was a psyop involved as far as like paragliders coming in and massacring a fucking a concert, like however you see that, like if you think that that Hamas did that, or if you think that probably the IDF or the Mossad or the CIA was involved in that, however you see that, there was actually innocent people that probably died in that scenario. And guess what? Like, the people that are in charge, that small psychopathic group, they don't give a fuck about the Israelis. They don't give a fuck about the Jews. Look, Israel right now is the most woke poked, Brandon Booster, MAGA jabbed group in the entire planet. Absolutely. And what does that fucking tell you? They don't give a shit about the Jews. They don't care about those people. They're using them, and they fucking use that name like there is a small psychopathic group that's actually in charge. So when people say like the Jews are in charge, that's so simplistic. That's so stupid. No, like the dude that fucking makes me a delicious pastrami sandwich at this deli over here that's been family owned for fucking generations, he has nothing to do with any of this psychopathic bullshit. There's small, psychotic, evil fucking families that are involved in all of this evil shit.
Yeah. No matter what, the working man has more in common, and
with each other.
I'll go ahead and say that right now.
Honestly, dude, I got more in common with a Palestinian and a Jewish carpenter and this guy over here and somebody from fucking Iraq and somebody from Africa and somebody from Finland than in all of these psychopathic rulers.
And the people who
we're all pawns, man. Yeah, we're all fucking pawns. Whether I'm a black pawn or a white pawn, we're both fucking pawns, bro.
Well,
we're fucking both pawns.
Realistically, we talk about all this state level stuff. You and I, no matter what what we talk about religion or spirituality, or what we talk about ideology, wherever we claim, you and I, no matter how much of we're different, have more in common than us are the mayors of our town. Like whatever city we're in, your mayor is part of this club that you're talking about, the sociopaths who don't give a shit about you and never will. No matter how different we are,
dude, because a lot of folks in our like what you would say like a conspiracy community or this or that think that things can be solved on a very small community basis, and they would say something like, hey, maybe our town can be safe. But you're saying you even think a mayor of a town, you think almost every town or almost every town? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a whole other bag of fish. I'm just saying, like the whole idea of leadership, corporate leadership, especially something like that. You're talking about people who survive paycheck to paycheck versus someone whose job is to be a politician.
Yeah, think about right.
Like the
whole idea, however you want to look at it, because I get it, where some people will say that it's necessary or it's this or it's that, but the whole idea of a public servant is a joke, because at one time I think a lot of those positions were voluntary, and like if you're looking at somewhere like New Hampshire, like a lot of the Congress even are unpaid positions, and then you can tell me you're a public servant. but the majority of these like Congress and senators and this and that, or even like a fucking sheriff or a mayor, or they are parasites.
Take this for granted. All right,
All
here's
of them are
an
paid
example.
through forceful taxation, every single one of their positions. And so to me, there is nothing, there is the whole idea of the class of the government and the people.
Here's
and
an example.
their cronies and the people.
Yeah, here's an example. In Texas, because I cover mostly Texas news, we have Governor Greg Abbott, right? Champion of the far right, champion of the red pill and the MAGA and all that, supports Trump. He has made it a law that you cannot qualify for state funding, grant programs, any kind of money from the state of Texas. If you boycott Israel, you have to sign a loyalty oath to the nation of Israel. Talk about a Zionist occupied government. The population of Jews in Texas is 200,000 people. The population of Muslims is 500,000 people. We're talking about two minorities that equal 0.001% of 30 million people in a state. Yet we have to sign a loyalty oath to Israel, specifically against their enemies in Palestine, which makes no sense, is completely undemocratic in any way you look at it. But it's 100% a definition of Zionist occupied governments who were so detached from reality that they put into law. Like I said, you wonder why our tax money is going to the Ukraine. That's the thing. Like, it's not us. It's not Americans who are sending. We're not getting our checkbooks out and writing it. We're not getting our credit cards and our debit cards and sending money like we're giving money away ourselves personally. It's our taxpayer money.
But brother,
being
robbed
from us.
It's deeper than that.
Billions are going. Oh, it's all okay. So the entire American economy. There's a flag. So you want to know, I guess, how my thoughts of this. There's a flag. It's a meme where they show the flags of Washington D.C., the District of Columbia. They show the flags of the Vatican and London City. These are the three main. Like Rothschilds own London City. Like Pope owns the Vatican owns the Catholics. And that owns the Catholics own the Vatican. And of course, Washington D.C. is the Pentagon. It's the military. It's this commander-in-chief figure, and that these three capitals could never invade the surviving Roman Empire of the Middle East in this idea of the Islamic Caliphate or the Ottoman Empire as it existed. And this was because of the lineage of Rome. These people have dignity and self-respect and a culture that will immediately ally with themselves over so they don't want to convert to this idea because in their hearts they believe in the Antichrist. And that's why their token religion, their Abrahamic religion of choice that they will defend and die for, are the Jews, are the Israelis, because the Israelis and the Jews don't believe in Jesus. They reject Christ. They say he is not the Messiah. And you can say, that's not anti-Semitism. That's just accepting the fact that Jews don't believe in Jesus. That's the selling point. They're like, well, we don't have the Jesus. Like, you say, you can believe in God, but we don't think he's our Messiah. We think he was a prophet. We think he was an educated man, a scholar, but he wasn't our Messiah. That's the whole rabbi spiel. For years I studied this. I know 100%. Watch Brother Nathaniel if you really like Christian orthodoxy, who is a converted Jew, or Bill Schnoblin and all that. The idea that these people worship Lucifer, if they're fake Christians, they will worship Lucifer or they'll worship a replacement Jesus, like Simon or Mithraeus or all this like type of stuff that's not Jesus, but it's like Jesus like, like they'll be like, oh, well, Jesus is actually like this in the astronomy, astrotheology, all this stuff that they worship. That's not accepting the fact that Jesus was Messiah. Now, this is why they've chosen Israel, because that is in the land of the Middle East, 100% Abrahamic. It was either Christian, Torah Jews, or basically Jews who lived in submission and diaspora. They didn't make any claim to politics. They just coexisted, and they were allowed to survive because of the Muslims. They started doing the Crusades and everything. Repeated the Crusades. It's a 20th century crusade. And like the Crusades, what they don't tell you is that the 1940s, the 1950s, the whole idea of the Israeli repatriation was immediately a war. It was immediately killing civilians, burning down villages. Like you said, the idea of planting a tree and being like, this is where I planted this tree, trees for Israel. Every single settlement in Israel where the Jews live, from the ocean, from the Mediterranean all the way out to the West Bank, all their borders, was built on the graveyards of Palestinian settlers, shepherds, nomads, and various different Christian Yazidis and Coptics, Gypsies, Roma. Armenians were there. People don't even talk about the Armenians. The Armenian genocide coincided with this. It was part of the buildup to it. Is that the Armenians have a stake? You know, in Jerusalem there are four quarters. There is the Jewish, there is the Palestinian Muslim, there's the Christian, and there's Armenians. And Armenians are part of this. The whole thing. The idea that these are people who did not bow to them, and they were genocided. And this never gets talked about. What gets talked about? Poor us. We're victims. We tried to go back to our holy land. You guys attacked us. You don't want us to be here. And even in every single discussion later on about the wars, the 6 Days War, the USS Liberty, fails to mention the fact that this is 100% an illegal occupation. It is a triumph of foreign mercenaries and basically European trained Gladio Nazi leftovers
of Rothschild-funded foreign mercenaries.
Oh, absolutely.
And as far as you want to go back, like, let's keep going further back. So even by their own mythology, you can say that the Jews say that they were brought from the land of Egypt, and then they were brought to the land of Canaan, where they conquered this territory that was their promised land, and this is where they're from. Who was living there before? The Canaanites. Who are these Canaanites? Who are these Philistines? Who are these people? Maybe the Palestinians that were living there before you guys conquered this area? Like, so maybe, like, if you
are the Khazarians.
It's so silly and arbitrary where they say, like, well, it was ours first. Well, when was it? Well, after we took it. Well, who did you take it from? Well, the people that were living there before that. Who are the people that were living there before that? I don't know. We killed them. You know, it's like, to me, it's just like the people that are saying that, like, we absolutely have to recognize this land as like Israel's, and you're like, okay, well, are you going to give your house back to the Native Americans? Why not?
A lot of that,
piece of shit, you fucking occupier. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, to me, like,
a lot of it's always used for that tit-to-tat thing. But the thing is, unlike the Native American wars, which were themselves a great travesty and a crime, and I always put down Native American because I believe that a lot of what the Native American history, just like all history, was fake and gay and fake and just absolutely a cover up for a number of reasons. But like you said, who was these Canaanites? The Canaanites were the Khazarians. That's who they evolved into. They eventually became this Rothschild. Who the Rothschilds are from? They're from the Canaanites, the people who worshipped Isis.
And who were before that? They were the Sumerians with the Babylonians.
The Sumerians and the Babylonians are the ones who conquered them back, because they were conquered by Moses during the Exodus, and they intermarried, and then they were conquered back. And that's the kind of thing, like, the Babylonians, same thing, had a claim to Jerusalem. They had,
so to me, King Solomon, it's so goddamn wild that, like, these modern day Israelites are saying, like, I know I'm from Switzerland. I know that I'm from Germany. I know I'm from, Lithuania. I know I'm from England. But God promised me this, so this is my land. And you're like, what the fuck?
Which is why the claim of the idea that this is a war against religious extremism, this is a war against racism, this is a war against intolerance, this is a war against they'll always say that. They'll say Hamas, Palestine, the people of the Middle East, of Lebanon, their neighbors, that they were always racist against them and the rightful repossession of this land from, like, this in their eyes, this Saint Rothschild. Right, the British Petroleum Company.
They always were. Yeah, it seems like they were always kind of sour against this group of ethno-nationalists that were trying to take their house.
Well, the idea.
How does that work, man? Why do we hate this group of ethno-nationalists that are, like, extremely xenophobic, that think they're better than everyone? that think that they are owed this. Like, why
There
are
is
they like, why are people so sour against this group of people that think they're better than everyone, think that they're God's chosen people, and they think that they're owed this land?
yeah,
Hey, God told me your house is my house now.
the
So
rabbi.
anything that I do is justified. So if I go in and fucking steal your house and murder your wife and kick you out of your house, well, God told me that was okay.
Well,
Why
that's the
are
thing.
you so angry? Why do you hate me? You're a bad person. You hate
Yeah,
me. Why do you hate me? Because I took your house.
the idea of it is hilarious, and it's obvious. The idea of someone exactly, if they took your house and then you fight back and then they say, okay, we'll make peace, give me half your house, or you can go back to your bedroom, but I can watch you and surveil you and build a wall around you and make sure that you don't come into my side of the house because I don't trust you and you're a terrorist. And not only that, I control the mass media, and I'm just going to be telling the neighbors, like on big
Well, the
ass
whole
TV
idea of
screens, like you're
anti-Semitism,
just an
you're
asshole.
not even Semitic.
Well, it's like
How the
I'm going to
fuck
be
can you be
broadcasting.
anti-Semitic? How can you like
Yeah, why you're the bad guy for wanting your house back and like painting you as evil, and I'm gonna do 9/11 and I'm gonna blame it on you. And
what if
it's like
I'm just
nothing exists in the context.
anti-asshole?
Well,
What
see, nothing exists in the context. So you wonder, like, well, how bad can Israel be? They did 9/11 and then blamed it on the Taliban in Afghanistan, and then we also invaded Iraq because of that. So it's a factor that no matter how far away you want to get away from it, America is like 100% being led like a bull or an
yeah,
army
dude.
by
So
this
to get
policy
back
at this
to,
point.
like, I know we're gonna, this is pussyfooting, whatever you want to call this. Like, I have sympathy for anybody that was uprooted from their houses, that
Yep.
were taken into camps, that were tortured and murdered. That, and so you can call this like in the Holocaust, but then to then turn around and do it to other people
Other
in a
people.
new
Yep.
place, you
Well,
don't get
exactly.
to fucking, like, it's hard for me to have sympathy, continued sympathy for you, like, because I absolutely believe, I mean, that they were singled out and hurt in a certain way, but guess what, there was also a lot of other groups that were being singled out and hurt in that way. And so it's a complicated fucking thing, but then for you to turn around and use the same fucking methods, and
Yeah.
then using the same and doing the same fucking exact same things, and then
Exactly.
you say, like, I'm still a victim,
Yep.
I'm being hurt right now.
I think it's so self-evident. It's so self-evident, and it's not a new thing that people didn't support it when it happened, when it first started happening. People haven't supported it since. There's hundreds of thousands of people who don't support it. I mean, just like in the Jewish community alone, they're called Torah Jews. It's the whole thing is that like even amongst the Jewish faith, that's extremely protested this idea of the Zionist nation of Israel. But even then, like ethically, it just makes sense on paper. Nobody with the conscience who is born in the modern world could side with them as the good guy, given any realistic understanding of what's going on. Even the fact this happened once would immediately set your heart against them if you grew up just in the sense of good versus evil, right versus wrong. There's bad to hurt people, right? Like anyone who hurts people is bad. Anyone who hurts, especially innocent and vulnerable people, is worse. And the idea that you always cheer for the underdog, you cheer for people who have the less and are fighting the overpowered oppressor. Like the idea of like if you were to tell this to a child, they'd be like, "Yeah, right on, right? Like I'm fucking 8 years old, but I'm totally on board with like we got to kick that bad guy's ass, right?" And you're like, "That bad guy's name is Israel, and they're bombing
It's
Gaza children. They blew up a
the
hospital. They
Jetsons.
killed
It's
800
the
people in a hospital.
Jetsons versus the Flintstones at this point.
It's
And
one,
the
and it's not
Jetsons
even
are
like they
flying
fight it.
around in their flying cars, and they're dropping bombs on literal fucking, and the problem is they wouldn't be cavemen if they weren't being forced to be cavemen. They're in these open air prisons. They're in this area that they're not allowed to leave. They're not allowed
Exactly.
to go anywhere. They don't have actual, like, representation. They, with the whole idea that Israel can turn off their electricity and water,
Mm.
tells you what you need to know about them.
And I will say that too, that can't be, it's not in a vacuum. So all this stuff adds up and it stacks on each other. So not only you have that, right? The idea that this is a technologically superior military with Western technology, Western jets, smart
Western
bombs.
funding.
Yeah. Exactly, the nuclear power level of their weaponry, the satellites. It's not only Israel, it's the United States, it's the EU, it's basically the Canada at this point, the Five Eyes powers, Australia is a part of it. They all can add special forces like Germany,
Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America, England. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they have this huge alliance that is treating them as if though they're completely justified in doing things like bombing hospitals, because those nations themselves do the exact same thing because they are controlled by these Zionist occupier, racist apartheid terror state leaders and people who follow that ideology. It's 100% neo-colonialism. And like I said, it's a death cult, and it's to the point that 100% of our power structure is completely at their mercy. This is why 2 aircraft carriers are sitting out there, not on the side of Gaza, but waiting to bomb Gaza, waiting to bomb Lebanon, waiting to bomb them. Once rightfully so, those countries start kicking Israel's ass. And the thing with the IDF, like you said before, what I believed about, it doesn't matter, and that's true. It doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, it's all fog of war. And like I said, it's like we're never going to know the full picture. But I actually believe that it was a legitimate attack because Israel's super weak. It's a paper tiger. And in 2007 and 2006, they fought Lebanon, and they fought them to a stalemate, and they haven't fought any modern wars since. They've, like I said, literally been killing children, who've been throwing rocks at tanks with snipers. They've been running over American protesters with bulldozers. They've been forcing illegal settlements at the end of an AR-15 to women who are breastfeeding children and stuff, and just taking them out of their apartments. They've been doing things like V for Vendetta style fucked up Orwellian police state shit, making people go through like 10 fucking checkpoints just to get to work, and having their ID scan, full body scan, TSA level stuff like that, like getting pat down. This is highly offensive to their culture. They put armed guards of the IDF at every mosque in the West Bank in Jerusalem as a show of force, as a show of submission. This is classic psychological warfare and a domination. It's not genocide. It is a genocide. And the idea is that to this day, 2023, currently, the world situation is now Britain, America, the EU, Germany, all of them support the eradication and the commitment of this genocide against the people of Gaza, against the Palestinians, because they are defending themselves. Like I said, they can explain this to a child why this is ethically right, but they are defending themselves when even the United Nations and everyone talks about New World Order, this globalist, that, by globalism. Alex Jones is a Zionist shill. He works for Stratfor.
He is, man.
By the Jews and
it's sad to fucking admit it. You can't have heroes anymore.
Well, what they've been trying to teach you is that the UN is evil. But the UN actually, if you just sit down and check it out, you're like, oh, you don't want genocide? How fucking evil is that? You think there should be an international effort to try to not let people go extinct because of random, violent, genocidal, racist apartheid states like Israel? And the UN famously says that they're a racist apartheid state. But the UN, for example, it says that anyone who is suffering illegal occupation or possible genocide or invasion can resort to every means at their disposal to liberate themselves and fight for their survival and freedom. This was written because of the issues and situations in Africa where there were genocidal warlords, there were communist rebels, there were apartheid states, and to this day, people need to realize there are laws. There are so many libraries filled with volumes of international law regarding war, regarding the right and wrong way of conducting it and the legalities of it. And legalities are just a fancy word of saying, is it ultimately justified? And this is not going to stop the bullet and not
It's
stop
not
that.
going to stop. And
But,
Tex, I'm just going to throw something out there.
but what it
The
does
whole
do
idea
is,
of international law in war, because I think of war, and war is obviously bigger, deeper than any fight between man on man, right? But the whole idea, dude, I'm conflicted with this because let's think about it. Like in a fight, let's say you and I were fighting, you and me, and we're fighting here. And like, I don't know your intentions. Are you going to kill me? Are we just going to have a manly fight and we're going to punch each other and then we're going to be like, okay, we're going to be on our way. But any fight that you have could theoretically, you don't know the other person and their intentions, and it could be a battle to the death. So the whole, like, is I had this, taught to me as a young man by older gentlemen that took me under their wing and kind of taught me. It was like in a fight, he goes, don't ever throw the first punch, don't ever look for the fight, but in a fight, make sure you're the one that ends it, right? The whole idea of like, there's nothing that's off the table when you're in a fight, meaning like if somebody has got you down, like, try to rip their testicles off. That sounds awful, right? If you're like, if you're in a fight, like the whole idea of like, so I mean, I'm thinking of the whole idea of like laws in war, because dude, I get it too. Because holy shit, are there awful weapons out there? There's literally fucking like nerve gas that you could do that could like literally make people's like bodies contort and like kill them, and that sounds awful. But like, and the whole idea too, because I'm not even 100% sure how I feel about nukes. I don't even know if I think they're real. They might be. I'm honestly, I'm agnostic about it because I've heard the great arguments that they're not real. I've heard the great arguments that obviously they're real, retard. But like, oh man. Anyways, I'm sorry. What were you talking about, like NATO and their whole like war crimes? And I get it, war crimes are awful, but like war is ugly, and war is.
But it puts public opinion, and it puts, so for what example of war crime? What now? The torture and killing of prisoners. Now, this is a very small detail, and everyone always says a thing like, "Well, if you hate them, if you're an enemy, shoot them. Why do you take them prisoner and stuff?" It's because it's a subtle, long-term psychological strategy to prove moral superiority, which can win hearts and minds. And like you said, there are no real winners in war. It's just who proves that who survives, right? Now, the idea, though, behind the laws of international warfare, this is like everything else. Society, people are not this berserk, psychopathic entity. Even in war, the idea is that it's a political act. It has a political objective, and when you look at, yes, this death cult, they're the most brutal in all history. That in the Soviet Union. And yes, hundreds of millions of people have died in the last 100 years. Say, for example, 1/5 of the Korean population of North and South Korea during the 3-year Korean War, 1/5 of the population, 80% of the Japanese infrastructure burned to the ground during 4 years of war with the United States. But are the Japanese still here? Are the Koreans still here? Yes. What had to happen was that it's not an extermination. Wars are not extermination. Wars are politicized actions. And where is North Korea still independent? The United States did not win the Korean War. It was fought to a stalemate. Our forces were actually forced to retreat. We could not have the resource. And so, like, things like that. Like, no matter how many you kill, the idea is that doesn't win wars. What wins wars? Politics and negotiations and public image and reputation. And the more war crimes you commit, the more bad karma internationally it sticks on you like a chain, to the point that the United States is that global pariah that it was during 9/11 because of that attitude that we are exempt because we are better at war. We use things like napalm on villages.
Hey, buddy.
like Phoenix
Tex,
project.
I think you're onto something, and I think it is fucking uh, fascinating and brilliant, because the whole idea of a nation is actually to be a concise nation. So, like, even in the Bible, it says, like, a house of cards divided against itself is going to fall, right? So, you have to have the whole entire nation behind you and the actions behind you to actually win. Where you say that we haven't won, because, like, we won in World War II. Why did we win in World War II? Because the propaganda machine was behind us, because the people thought that we were fighting a noble battle, because the people believed in it. And then in the war that, like, obviously America was more powerful than Vietnam. We didn't win in Vietnam. Why didn't we win in Vietnam? Because we were fighting against ourselves, because we fucking knew what we were doing was fucking wrong.
Well, the
And
thing
so,
with
like, the
Vietnam,
whole idea that, like, the nation is the people, and that, like, that a group of people needs to get the whole team to fight, like, oh man,
yeah,
you're onto something that is really fucking fascinating.
which is what I
You
was
have
going to
to
say.
be doing something righteous to have the people believing in you, because the people are what's powerful.
Yeah,
There's
and
a
what I
group of psychopaths that are in charge, that are telling people what to do, but, like, honestly, the people of a nation are what makes a nation powerful. And
yeah,
so they
and
have to believe in that national vision. They have to believe in that illusion. And it's like a giant egregore. It's like a fake, because I mean that's the way that I believe in the state. I think the state is an egregore. But if you're
absolutely.
not doing it right, if you're not smart about it, if you're not really making, like, if your belief structure isn't sound, then you're a weak, poor egregore. And the United States right now is a weak, poor egregore, because we have a idea of national pride, and of right and wrong, and we're the sick man, because we have been doing these atrocities that, like, contradict ourselves. And so, like, people don't believe in it. And so it's this whole idea of nationalism, which is like an ugly word, and people don't like they don't like to hear the word nationalism. But if you have a country that actually is nationalist, that is a healthy egregore. That's a country that believes in itself, that is actually living by its, like, morals and their dogma, and people, or at least people believe they are.
What you see now is a radical moment in history, because last 100 years was a radical moment in history. Same thing. History repeats itself, like it's constantly cyclical, and it repeats itself. Last 100 years, you saw an end in colonialism. If you were alive the 100 years before, you saw the rise of colonialism. Right? You saw these young empires, these younger empires vying for power, but committing these atrocities in their basically their zeal, their youth as an empire, and they could hide it because of the enthusiasm towards power, right? Like, oh, the Belgians are just raping and killing the Congolese, but they want diamonds. So in their youth, this is fine. But now we know that they're not to be trusted. And if you think about any white European nation controlling Africa, like the French, we know that's an exploitative, historically proven to be evil. We've already had Mahatma Gandhi. We've already had Martin Luther King. We've already had this idea of like Pan African liberation. Right? We already have the history of saying that one is right, one is wrong, and the idea of the American spirit still supporting the wrong thing is unignorable now, when we are sending, say, the bombers to kill Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. But we are also saying that we'll support the French, like the French eventually had to retreat. But the idea that they will attack in Niger, and what Niger did, this idea of coups, this idea of the militaries, these leaders, these young new generation leaders, men in their 30s, men in their 40s, men in their 20s, who have already grown up after 9/11, have seen the bullshit. They grew up watching loose change and the boondocks for whatever their country's worth is, right? They know history. They know the reality of the world because they have international news, phones, internet, and stuff like that. But they've become the new rebel warlords. They're like Ho Chi Minh. They're like that Vietnamese spirit where they are reasserting and finding their traditional roots. A lot of it based on ethnicity, a lot of it based on culture. But you're going to see that happening around the world where these old corrupt systems of power get slowly chipped away based on real real revolutionaries who use violence. Because at this point, you can 3D print guns. There are so many weapons to be possessed, but it's not about weapons. It's about strategy. It's about politics. It's about PR. It's about things that the Pentagon admits it can't keep up with. Cyber war,
because reality
like,
is perception.
Well, it's a war. It's
so
all part of the war.
Reality, what becomes narrative is, yeah, man, you're right, bro. Because
that's what the war crimes thing.
Talking about a narrative war, you're talking about people's perceptions of what they see, and so
that
ultimately becomes the history. What ultimately becomes the narrative is people's perceptions of what actually happened. It's not what actually happened. It's what people's perceptions of what happened.
But and that's the same thing here. I don't think in 100 years anyone's going to have an accurate picture of history, even though every single thing is documented online.
Because it's not possible.
It's going to be
you and me, Tex. You and me, Tex. We could go to a concert. We could go see I don't little Uzi Vert or whoever's the popular person right now. Whatever mumble rapper is like the rapper of the time. You and me could go see him and a couple of our friends, and then we could all talk about the concert. And you and I could have had the best night of my life. You could have had the worst fucking night of your life.
Yeah, it's subjective. Yeah.
It's subjective because reality is it's all perception, and it's all our realities become that. And it's whoever is in charge of the mic at the time gets to say what happened at that concert.
Already you have two main positions in America, and you always have had two main positions, like a lot of it minority positions. It's like I don't believe in the binary. I don't believe in the two poles of power: America, West and East, red versus blue, capitalist versus communist, Coke versus Pepsi. I don't believe that. I think that excludes the whole nuance of the many different angles in it. But ultimately, you have the idea that there is like a red pilled and a blue pilled reality, right? A lib Democrat, woke LGBT type Q pro type world, and the opposite of that, right? Your conservative theologies. I believe the American Civil War is already occurring.
Or even the idea of LGBTQRS, ABT $sign is a thing.
Well, that's a whole
fucking. That's a whole psyop in itself, too.
That's psyop in itself. And see, that's the thing. How you said that, people are waking up. I think that the American Civil War is going to be started on those lines. I think it was started in the 1960s on the same lines, with this idea that was what they wanted, is this idea of a rainbow Nazi, fascist corporate takeover of America, a worse corporatism, because to be politically incorrect is to suffer the wrath of a murder. Like, to be guilty of murder is to be the same thing as being, a homophobe or something like that, right? Like, you could literally be thrown in a concentration camp, re-educated, have your kids taken away from you, your possessions and stuff.
Dude, the way when you talk to young people right now, the worst thing you could be called is a racist.
The racist, yep, exactly.
So what is a racist? Give me an explanation. Like, give me a fucking. You say, what is a racist? And they're like, they have a hard time even telling you what a racist is. Because a racist is now just a construct.
Yeah.
A racist is whatever the bad thing is. The racist is now, the word racist, that's like calling someone the devil.
Well, what now?
You know what I mean? That becomes an avatar. Like, that becomes the adversary. That becomes... Yeah. Well, like, it's wild, and now that can also be called the fascist.
Yeah,
what is a fascist?
Well, see, that's the thing.
And then that has a million explanations. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tex.
Oh, it's not about the idea of being bogged down. It's the idea that these ideologies now are taking over people's minds to the point that they are no longer able to coexist. And it's on all sides. Like you said, the idea of like what is PR, what is the psychological, why couldn't we win in Vietnam? So it's because of hypocrisies and because of like empires. Why do empires fall? It's because their own ideologies become incompatible of internal coexistence between the different radicalized castes that they promote to keep everybody weak and to keep everybody from not seeing the bigger picture. Like I said, who controls our government is an extreme minority, and they control our military, they control our security force, and they've given everybody else scraps and basically enforced chaos. And that's why you have major urban cities like destroyed, younger generations that basically war with the older based on these fake virtues and like signals, like the idea of moral purity. It's this idea of populism, like MAGAism rising up, and the idea of the other half, the Antifa. And this is all 100% intentional chaos. But this is why the American Civil War already started. It's not a shooting war yet, but it could be within the next 10 years. And like I said, no one will ever look back in history and see how these civil wars started correctly. The Civil War started not from regular people wanting to fight, but from leadership who were representing states at the level, creating secession. They
Because
didn't want to
all
be a part
war,
of the Union anymore because the Union they felt was being led in a wrong direction. Now, I know the Civil War is
because
very
every
controversial to talk about.
revolution is one it's one powerful like mafia family wanting to take over
Yeah,
another mafia family, because
think
there
about
is
this.
no actual revolutions that we've ever seen ever that have
Think
been a
about this.
real groundswell revolution, because
If
they've all been co-opted and have all been controlled by one powerful oligarch trying to take out another oligarch.
yeah,
And
if
because the like you're saying, like the war is going to be very almost impossible to pinpoint when it started. But I think that you're absolutely right that in the history books 100 years from now, they're going to say that this probably started in around, I don't know, probably 2001. Maybe it started even before then. And
well,
because they're going to call this like the American Civil War 2. And dude, I think that you are onto something. Brother, we're goddamn close to 2 hours. We're just gonna have to do this again.
yeah, no
But
problem. It's one of the things where you can tell. I've talked about. I did an episode today. Actually, I did a podcast episode today. I went for 2.5 hours, and I was talking about the the psyop of terrorism, Islamic terrorism in Texas coming through the border, and how that's over 10 years old. And there are films like Sicario and Alex Jones did whole specials about how ISIS camps were in Mexico and they were coming across the border and they were gonna. And this is 100%, like I said, like it's you can focus on one aspect of any of this, and I focus a lot on the Texas aspect, but it's all pieces of the puzzle for what's happening in the Middle East. And what's happening in the Middle East started with the Rothschilds, it started with the Khazarians, and it can trace itself all the way back to the beginnings of this whole mess, which is like the sacking of the first temple of Jerusalem, King Solomon, and stuff like that, Moses, and even beyond that. And it's 100% all relevant. If you're looking at it from a spiritual angle, if you're looking at it from a historical angle, or if you're looking at it from a military angle, what's happening, like just as a quick like wrap up, is that this is the Battle of Armageddon. And I kind of wanted to key it into this, that the Battle of Armageddon is both literally happening in the land of Israel, the land, of Armageddon. And I know Megiddo, it's land of Megiddo, but it's also happening spiritually in all the Zionist occupied places. Is that people are setting their, like, the seven kings, the seven dragon heads, the seven horns. These are all as they were known to be, um, men of the earth, men of nations, men with armies, men with forces, men who can control power in this world. And the people who control power in this world are godless. They are the antichrist spirit. Macron in France, all of the EU, Zelensky in the Ukraine. I would say Xi Jinping in China, definitely Xi Jinping in China. And these people who are openly at odds with Christianity, who
Vladimir Putin in Russia,
Vladimir. Well, I would
Zelensky
say
in fucking Ukraine. Every single one of these fucking heads of government,
Yep.
they're all avatars of the Antichrist.
Yep. Netanyahu in Israel and Biden in America. And especially Biden in America, especially the idea of American politics itself. When people go around talking about MAGA, for example, they don't know Magus is a satanic temple. Yeah, well, Magus is a satanic temple, highest level of priesthood. They're called MAGA. They're called Magus. And that's why when people go around shouting MAGA, MAGA, make America great again, they're shouting basically loyalties towards the high priest of a temple of Satan and a high priest church of Satan, which Donald Trump surely is. And like I said, at one point, you can say the truth without having to immediately pledge allegiance to the other fake truth. And so you see that at all levels, no one's talking about Jesus Christ the Messiah. No one's talking about the Battle of Armageddon, the book of Revelations, because they're afraid, and intentionally so, that he's coming back. And the idea that Battle of Armageddon, what happens? Christ comes back after the armies of the world basically not only kill each other, but try to unite and fight Christ, who they know is coming back. And the world itself is weaponized against them. Birds fly at the heavens, the skies from them. The whole idea of it is that it's the annihilation of these evil forces. And that's 100% what we're seeing real time now. I think that's going to play out.
Just to circle back, exactly what you're talking about. You're also talking about eschatology. You're also talking about like end time prophecy. You're talking about things that are supposedly said in the book of Revelation and the Bible that Christian Zionists are watching carefully, and they're saying this is what's going to happen at the end times, is what's going to bring around the rebirth of Jesus Christ, is going to bring back the second coming of Jesus. And what's crazy to me is that like these folks that are controlling the world, these rulers, whatever the fuck you want to call them, like I said, you can be, to me, it's very simplistic just to say, call them Jews or something like that, because to me, they're not Jews. To me, they are a group, like some people call them the Jesuits, because like these people wear many coats, right? So you can call these people the Jesuits. You can call these people the Illuminati. You can call these people the globalists. You can call these people whatever the fuck they are. Like it's a small group of psychopaths that run this. They don't actually believe what they're selling. They're selling a false, like they have their own beliefs. They have their own eschatology. They have their own end time revelations. And they were integral in writing, like let's say like the Council of Nicaea and the control and of what is now written in biblical text for the majority of the world at this point. Whether you're reading the Quran, the Torah, the Bible, whatever you're reading, they were very specific in putting certain things in there and leaving certain things out. This group of psychopaths make you think that by carrying out certain things, by construction of a certain building in a certain place at a certain time for the third time, this is going to now bring about this whole prophecy, fulfill it, and now Christ is going to come back and bring around the end of times. And like, to me, this group has another agenda. They know what they're doing. It's putting them in places of power. And the majority of the world is just going by what they think is going to bring about Jesus, what's going to bring about the Christ.
I agree. And a great way of thinking about that is the symbolism. Like, so people think in the book of Revelation, there are monsters and there's this great psychedelic type of like hell on earth. You know, the dead are walking on the earth and the sky's red, and like all this like insect people are coming from portals that are opening up. They think this extremely extravagant thing. What I would like to always say is that that is what an ancient man who is having a vision of modern warfare and is trying to his best in his own occult way. Because remember, John of Patmos was a Chaldean. He was an astrotheologian. He was one of these members of the Illuminati who started having visions, converted, and was punished by being put in Patmos, the island. So he was referencing in his own symbolism, in his own idea, what he was shown, which was these modern wars, the idea of jets, helicopters, men with firearms, men in chariots, armored tanks, the idea of the insect-like armor, chest plates, and people are thinking Book of Revelations. Oh, when is the scorpion men locusts going to come out of the portal of the seventh? And they think of these extravagant type of realities that aren't real. They've been pushed. That agenda has been pushed by these Illuminatists who believe this separate eschatology that has been made into the dominant mainstream popular eschatology. A big factor, the Left Behind series. You know that Left Behind series where people are raptured? 100% bullshit. Never happens in the Old Testament, never happens in the New Testament, never prophesied to happen in any book of Revelations or apocalypses by any Gnostic classes. 100% a modern American invention by Freemasons who
Schofield Bible.
Yeah, who didn't
American
want people
Christian
just to
Zionists.
Yeah,
None of this theology existed prior to around 1870 to 1890.
100%
brand new constructs. Yeah, it's all complete bullshit.
And it's like how the Mormon Church basically wrote a lot of its scripture. They made it up. It's just a guy who knew Freemasonic rituals and rites and passages of Solomonic temples and was like, yes, I have this Old Testament knowledge because I directly am in connection with the divine, which is how most of these cults like Scientology. If people really knew how influential Scientology world was to the world of real politics, espionage, intelligence, etc., they would freak the fuck out because that's provable modern invention by a cult leader who's just literally creating like concepts based on like Eastern esotericism, yogic practices, and things like that. But it is a cult of personality. It is a 100% demonstratively artificial create. If you want to make money, you make a church type situation. And people are like, well, how influential are they? In a thing called Operation Cinderella, the Church of Scientology embedded 5,000 plus deep intelligence operatives into the American federal government, from the FBI to the White House. They 100% had the most extensive and successful espionage spy operation on the American government, better than the Soviet Union ever had. And they were feeding all of that information into the Church of Scientology.
Almost as good as Mossad.
Or the Mossad. No, the whole thing, that's true. Like, no one will ever say the truth. And that's senators and congressmen have come out and said that if people actually know about the extent of the infiltration of Israel into the American government, they would immediately revolt. Like they would immediately.
And it's also, to me, it's people that foolishly see a separation between the two.
Yep. That or Saudi Arabia or any of the global regional
or any of them, exactly. Because to me, these psychopaths, they are not playing one group of people over another. This is when we call them globalists. I mean, they literally see countries as like, they're like, we're it's like football teams to them. They don't give a fuck who wins.
Well, if you look at it now, for example, and I know we want to cut it short and everything. This is just parts of the conversation that we should have next time. That internally, the feds are the ones who create all the Antifa, BLM, all these ACAB groups that are causing all this chaos, these riots, these protests. It's the federal government and the Soros
It was the
people.
feds that made the Bolsheviks. It was the
Yeah,
feds
the
that
Fed,
made it was the feds that made the Hamas. It
exactly.
was
The
the
Israeli
feds that
Mossad
made
that
the
made the
Proud
bomb.
Boys.
Yes,
It was the
like
feds
100%.
that made. Yeah, how do you beat your opposition? You become them.
So the Civil War, American Civil War 2.0, based on these ideologies, which are not natural. No one was sitting around in American history in the cowboy days and pioneer days, settler days, manifest destiny days, ever arguing about these issues. They're non-organic to the American fabric. But now, since the federal government, Zionist controlled, death cult controlled, Illuminati controlled, are pushing this agendaism, you're gonna start seeing federal governments taking advantage of that, like agencies like the ATF, DEA, immigration, for example, and all these new immigrant populations, all these new, you know, lifestyle choices, etc., and radicalizing the shit out of these people, giving them guns, giving them training, giving them weapons, and then using them for false flag operations, mass shootings, acts of terror, etc. But you're going to see in like 5 to 10 years the shit that's going on in the Middle East happening in the USA because they got their experience in the Middle East over the last 20 to 30 years.
Well, and you
Creating
have been seeing it
ISIS.
this whole time,
Yeah,
where
creating
like
ISIS,
they'll take
creating.
someone that is like special needs, like. So I live in the Portland metro area. I live in Greater Portland, Oregon, right? I don't live inside of Portland. I moved about 45 minutes northwest of Portland to get out of the hellhole that is Portland, right? That so I but there was when I first moved here probably like 12, 13 years ago. The year that I moved here, they had this big Christmas tree lighting celebration, right? And there was this kid who the feds said like, "Hey, you're Muslim, huh?" Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm Muslim. Well, you know what Allah wants you to do, right? Kill a bunch of people. So why
Yeah,
don't we and they did this whole thing, this entrapment where they took this poor special needs kid. Like, I'm pretty sure he didn't have like, he wasn't like full retarded, but you know what I mean? Like he didn't
oh
have
yeah,
a
that's
full deck of
going on.
cards, right? He was like a young, dumb, probably like whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? Double digit
Oh,
IQ kind of
no, I
kid.
totally get it. I totally get it. And like they
And
did this thing in Dallas. They got a guy who was literally a loser, loner, didn't have a friend in the world. His parents even described him as someone who just didn't like he wasn't like intelligent and like his parents knew it. And he was radicalized online by the FBI. They gave him a truck with a bomb in it and then told him to sit in it and then just arrested him. That's how like he didn't have any hand in this. He didn't make a bomb. They didn't teach him how to like drive the truck. He just sat in the truck. They parked and they were like, go sit in that truck. And he did it because he thought these people were on his side. And no, absolutely they do that shit.
and
They
you know
did
what's
try
the most
to make
tragic thing, Tex? To me, the most tragic thing is this society makes you feel like a fucking loner, like you're a fucking
yeah,
loser. The whole idea, too, is like the whole schooling makes you feel like you're fucking stupid because you don't want to sit in a desk for fucking 8 hours. You don't want to sit here and listen to this fat pig with like purple hair tell you that you're a faggot and a loser and that you're
yeah.
and that
No, I
you're the
totally
problem
get
for all the
you. Like,
oh, you don't want to hear that? Oh, there's something wrong with you. You need
uh,
a pill. You need
that's
a
a
pill to
good
be able
point.
to sit down and listen to me speak to you for 8 hours and tell you you're the problem for all of society's ills. You
Well, that's
white,
a good point.
straight male, you have
I
got a
think,
penis, you're a monster. And so like society makes these people feel like they're social outcasts, like there's
yeah,
something different, like there's something wrong with them. And then at the same time, like so like human beings, we feel like we need camaraderie, we need brotherhood, we need fellowship, we need like we need camaraderie, right? We need like someone to make us feel like we're at home. And so then they'll build these psyops where they'll take this young poor like Muslim kid and be like, "Hey, brother, do you want to feel like we'll embrace you? You're part of us. You're part of a family. Hey, we love you. You're special. We'll listen to you. You want to talk for a while? Oh, hey, you know who's the worst? America. Let's kill them. Like,
yeah,
hey, you want to be part of our brotherhood? You want us to love you? You want to still be part of it? Like, all you got to do is sit in this van. Sit in this van with this made up bomb that's not real. And you know what I mean? Like, and so they show this like poor social outcast that has filled like neglected his whole life because our society is like fucked up to begin with.
and
It's
what they're
like a
doing
sick
now,
society, because like in a healthy society where we love one another, where we treat each other like brother, then there's not a young person that's going to be like, okay, I'll sit in a van and blow people up. They're not going to do that.
no, and what
Like
they're
in a
doing
healthy
is moving off.
society, dude, because you know what? We had the great Ryan Dawson on not that long ago. I don't know if you're familiar with him. I love Ryan Dawson. He's a great, fantastic researcher, but he lives in South Korea, and he's talking about how America is going down the fucking tubes. And he's talking about how like the fentanyl crisis, that like, yes, all the fentanyl is coming from China, and it is kind of like this sort of kind of warfare, but he goes like, what's the real cause? It's because Americans, it's that thirst for drugs. And why is there this thirst for drugs? Because we're so fucked up. Because I live in South Korea. He goes, I live in South Korea right now. Because we are literally touching China. There's not a huge thirst for fentanyl. There's not this huge overdose crisis. He goes, why? Because we're a tight knit society that love each other, that like support one another, that have roles in society. We have male and female. We have right and wrong. We have a tight knit, like, you know what I'm saying? Like they have a fucking actual society that like people feel like they can become involved in. And in America, like way the fuck way on the other side of the world from China, is like pumping up tons of fucking drugs and killing themselves with fentanyl. Why is that? It's because we feel empty, because we feel alone, because we feel ugly, because we feel hated, because we feel misunderstood, because we're searching for this empty hole that we have, this gaping wound, right?
Yeah.
And so we're filling it with everything. And so there's like these young, stupid, poor fucks that are willing to be like, okay, I'm feeling love for the very first time because the psychological operation of these fucking government agents that are going to trick me into the sitting in a van with a fake fucking bomb that's not even real to blow up people that I don't care about because they make me feel unloved.
Well, there's two things I want to say about that.
Sick and fucked up.
Yeah, there's two things I want to say about that. One, they're moving on from the individual, the targeted individual, to a targeted group of individuals. So they're going to start making like Antifa, BLM, etc. That's the wave of the future. It's no longer these solitary lone wolf type mass shooters.
Well, yes, because people want to be part of a group. People want to feel loved and understood, and so they're gonna fucking join up with other people like Black Lives Matter. You're one of us, brother. Come
but
join
you got to give it the terrorist tech, or you got to go do this thing.
Yes,
and like the
we exist because of this ultimate evil over here. Yeah.
That they made the trans community medically made them. They've made this tens of thousands, nearing 100,000 people. I know it's 300 million Americans. Remember, there's 300 million Americans. So this is like a 0.01% of all the population, right? Like 0.1% of the population. But they've made them so alienated and they've made them insane. This is where the next terrorism is going to come from. The rainbow Nazis is what I'm already calling them. And the people think Mad Max or the revolution is this idea of like savages. And like, but the idea of savagery comes from hatred of, like you said, spiritually thinking, psychologically, hatred of yourself, hatred and a nihilism that you don't have a future. You don't have a chance.
You don't have a future.
You don't have a family that loves you. Exactly.
A bunch of scared, sad, misunderstood,
self-mutilating people with weapons that the federal government's going to give. They're going to be the ones who are actually going into the U.S. Army, because the second thing I wanted to say is the PSYOP that they knew to radicalize people for crime is what they're relying on now to radicalize people to join the U.S. Army, because no one wants to join and support a foreign, in like totally undemocratic, unrepublican, that's not representative of the constituents of America. It has nothing to do with any relevant good versus bad system. There's no reason to join the military unless you're into like the mercenary idea of it, like you want power and like you're a complete sociopath, and like, but there are other ways to do it. You can become a corporate or a mercenary. So no one's even joining in that realm anymore. Who's joining? Overwhelmingly perverts and extremely lonely, alienated individuals, like autistic people and stuff like that, who still think it makes them tough or socially accepted, like they get friends for being in the U.S. military, and that's
Or
the
it
kind.
just
It's
gives
not
them a
fighters.
sense of purpose, a sense of being, a
Yeah,
sense of like, dude, there's so many empty, sad fucks that are just looking for something.
yeah,
And they're like, oh, I'm going to join something greater than myself.
myself.
I'm going to
And,
join the proud, the few, the Marines.
and
You know what I
so
mean? That whole fucking idea, like you're talking about autistic people, dude. Like I have fucking family that are autistic.
yeah,
I'm on the spectrum. My wife's on the spectrum. Pretty sure my kid's on the spectrum. Like we're all, you know what I mean? Like with this whole idea of just like this, man, it's fucking tragic, dude. You know what I'm saying? And it's these people that like they're trying so hard to be what they think society
once
needs them or wants
yeah,
them to be.
because the
And
feds are telling them, hey, do this thing.
yes,
Hey, if you join the U.S. Army, you get a college education, you get to go to stuff, you get to travel the world, you get success. We'll train you how
yeah,
to
you
do a
get to go
job.
to college.
Take care.
That
And it's
means
a
that
complete
we get
lie.
to put you through more years of
Indoctrination.
indoctrination that
Oh yeah.
we, it's so goddamn tragic.
And
It's
the whole thing is like this is only permissible because you're not thinking about what you're actually supporting. And yes, you may not be the one actually going, but the idea that there's two aircraft carriers right now supporting Israel who is bombing
Mhm.
Gaza, and these people are like, yeah, I like being in the Navy
Because
because I like to
Israel is
be
just an extension of America
yeah,
because
a
this is
BIPOC.
all a fucking joke and a psyop.
But
And
like, you talk to your average military member, and they're like, "Oh, I love being a BIPOC, tranny loving, brony, rainbow flag waving," and you're like, "What values are these? What like we're not sending." Like you can say, like we're not sending our best and brightest because yeah, they were a bunch of dumb idiots, but they still had
that
like
was the whole idea
standard
too
values
of
of right and
like,
wrong. Yeah,
because
like during
you
the
remember
Cold
what I
War.
said, the whole idea of like a country, whether right or wrong, the whole idea of a country that actually believes in nationalism is a healthy country that believes in their own that believes in their own lies, like because every country is built off of um, stories. Like even Rome was built of
Yeah,
Romulus and Remus, right? That whole idea, you have to embrace the idea of Rome. And when Rome fell, it's because they lost the idea of Rome, because what was more powerful than even a Hannibal was Rome was an idea. You couldn't just conquer it. It wasn't just a place. You could like Rome was in the people's minds, but once you've infected the mind virus, once that is taken over, then we might as well just be LGBTQRSABTV fucking HIV fucking like
yeah.
America
The
is
whole thing,
done because the mythos, the idea, the of what America was is done. It's dead. The American Empire is dead.
yeah, they started
And
flying the rainbow flag on military bases. This is true. They started flying the rainbow flag on military bases in the Middle
it's
East,
not
and then
just the
in the
rainbow
1980s.
flag, it's the
Yeah,
trans pride flag. It's the
yeah,
pride progress flag. It's so we've gone so fucking far, and it and whether people like it or not, because like I'm coming from an anarchist perspective, I'm a recovering anarchist, Tex.
that's
like,
not insulting. Yeah,
like that's silly to say, but like I've been an anarchist for the last like 8 years or something, and I have always looked at nationalism as the enemy, and I'm like, I don't know if nationalism can be weaponized. Nationalism can be ugly. Nationalism can be the enemy in a lot of ways, but sometimes like people need a mythos of like this idea of a people to believe in, to keep them homogenous, to keep them like together. They need something to tie them together, to build something strong that can fight against the invaders. Otherwise, if we don't have something, whatever that is, we are going to be destroyed from the inside out. And we are going to be taken over from these globalists, because the same people that think that the idea of nationalism is the enemy are the same people that want to devour us.
Yeah, and I would like to point out that, say, if we were going to have American Civil War again, think about just how weird it would be, because the USA, would have rainbow flag, New World Order, globalist type, global homo type values. And if they won, hypothetically, say history repeat itself and they won, history would be like, no, these were the good guys.
You know what? And that's what makes Russia. Russia has less people than us. They have less money than us. But I think that maybe Russia is stronger than us because they have a strong mythos.
The idea
of America's mythos is dead.
Yeah, a civilization. What makes America literally is chaos.
What tied Democrat and Republican, what tied left, right, center, whatever the fuck, was the American mythos. And I really feel like the American mythos of the American dream, that what, like, maybe we disagree, but hey, we'd fight for each other's right to believe in whatever we want to believe. To me, that inversion has already been taken over. That subversion has already taken its place. And dude, I honestly like Russia is kind of like the fucking, it's kind of like it's like a trucker stop of Europe. It's like this little spot where there's like, you can, it's not a fucking strong country in a lot of ways, but their mythos is strong. The people are strong. The people believe in that shit.
I would also say they are a very strong country, and what they've proven is actually that the West is far, far weaker, not than Russia, but far weaker than we like to pretend we are. Reality check.
But why is the West weaker? It's because the people don't believe in the mythos.
Yeah, we have no loyalties. We have no intentionally.
Because we undermine ourselves.
Yeah, we worship money. The whole idea is that you could say Russia worships Putin, Russia worships Russia worships their own religion, like the idea of the Russian Orthodox Church. You know what the West worships? Money. You know what money gets you? Nothing. It gets you a pocket full of money and a bullet in the face.
Love of money is the root of all
the root of all evil. Yeah, it's like the idea of being like, you can have served with honor in the U.S. military and still have trouble paying your rent when you get out. And that's just, people will walk all over you, and you become a lesser member of society because we don't honor any other commitment besides your wealth. And that's why we don't care about what the identity. It's all a sell. It's all a con. It's all to make money because it's all capitalism. And so the idea of like what this thing even was that united people, it ceased to officially exist when Rockefeller bought the United States in 1913 and the League of Nations. And so like the idea that that's a very old concept even in itself. And even then the idea of the Civil War, I always keep bringing in Abraham Lincoln was like the Joe Biden of the 1860s. It's just that through the lens of perspective, we're like, yeah, the USA, the Union won. Slavery
50 years, how are they going to see Joe Biden?
How are they? If a civil war broke out right now, and say by just the example of the U.S. Army being the U.S. Army and having like trillions of dollars worth of budget, and it crushes these rebel states, whoever they are.
We don't know that George Washington. Maybe George Washington was a giant fucking fat loser piece of. We don't know anything about him. We only know that he was a Freemason because of the paintings involved. We only know what we are told about him. I know nothing, dude. Fuck their history, fuck their history books, fuck what they want to say.
You
All I
talk
know
about
is what I can see in my own hands, and then even then, you have to
yeah,
question what you fucking see with your own eyes at
you
this
talk
point.
about these pervert societies and when did they get in power. So Benjamin Franklin, one of the first founding fathers, was in the Hellfire Club in England during the time leading up to the revolution. And then when he got too hot because he was, American and they were British, he went to France and was a member of their Illuminati. And
Yeah.
basically, the idea of the idea that America has ever been separated from European Illuminatists and like this cult, whatever it is,
Our fucking country was founded by
down on that shit.
Freemasonic deists that
Exactly. And
were
so,
mystics, that were, yeah, I mean, these were all fucking Rosicrucian, they were all fucking Illuminati, Freemasonic, occultists, and that's
exactly.
literally what our fucking country was founded on, founded by, and that's the same people that were in charge that are in charge.
Yeah, I would say that it's one of those things that people like to love to talk about this holiness of the USA, of what it means to be American and what it means to be righteous. Like this idea that we need to just get back to what it was. We need to go back to the revolution. We need to go back to the idea of the
The
union.
1776.
Yeah, so but I think from the very beginning of it, it was merely for money. It was merely to get the maximum amount of profits for a fewest amount of people possible, the elite landowning. I know that there's Jeffersonian versus Alexander Hamilton and the Federal Reserve, but after the Federal Reserve, like the idea of like what it comes down to is like you said, eventually people there's going to be such a gap in what the history of America tells us we should be striving for and what the new generations are brainwashed into believing is actually progress because the two cannot coexist. Like the idea of like conservative apple pie Americana Christian values type thing versus this idea of super hedonism and absolute destruction of one's own culture and society, tearing down statues and shit. Like just realistically, those are the real dividing lines. And so, like you say, you have a state like you live in Portland, Oregon. You said Cascadia. Cascadia in the Pacific Northwest gets talked about a lot. A lot of militias, a lot of people who live in the forest who want a white ethno state, homeschool their kids.
And they're not always, and see, that's part of the psyop too, is because like a lot of them aren't
They're not
even white,
Yeah,
and
they're not
and
white.
it doesn't have to be that. It's just a separation of these psychopaths that are trying to
Psychopaths for my
control
kids.
us.
Yeah, like I say,
Yeah.
I want to be able to educate my kids in my own home, however I wish to be. And these guys are federal government goons who are literally rainbow flag waving trannies. They're knocking on my door saying, "We own your kids. You give them to us, or we'll call you crazy and take your guns and fuck your life up, ruin your credit score, social credit scores." We want all this like, and the federal government is going to play both sides, give them both weapons, and create the American Civil War. But once the Cascadians are defeated by the military, the literal Pentagon, the red, white, and blue American patch wearing fucking Nazis, the police who are made up of these LGBTQ wingbats and all that, these fucking nut jobs. History is going to say that the Cascadians were the racist, xenophobic, evil ones. The Confederates, like the ones that they believe in these crazy things that are evil and wrong, and that the USA was ultimately the good guys. But we'll know in our hearts because we're living it and have to teach the future generations, always have to teach the people that the freedom fighters are typically the ones who are sane in all of this, typically are the ones in the right, typically the ones who are ethically fighting.
And that's why you'll only hear, the only narrative you'll ever hear about the Confederates is that they just wanted to keep slaves.
100%.
It was so much bigger than that. There was actual like groups that didn't want that. And when you hear about the Emancipation Proclamation that only freed the slaves in the South, it didn't free the slaves that were actually in the North, that they don't fucking talk about. The groups, there were fucking slaves in the northern fucking states too. Dude, it's so much fucking deeper and more fucking corrupt than you want to know, that you want to think about. You just want to have a clear-cut good guy, bad guy. Abraham Lincoln was the good guy, the fucking Confederates were the bad guys. And I'm not saying that either one of them were good or either one of them was bad. I'm saying that everything is fucking nuanced. There is no black and white. Everything's fucking gray. And you've been fed a fucking narrative and you just fucking believe that this is the good guy. This is the fucking
Abraham
bad
Lincoln
guy.
is just a good guy.
It's all
And he got
fucking
shot.
bullshit.
Really
It's
bad
all just power and control mechanisms from psychopaths up top. The same people that are funding the fucking Confederates were in the European countries were the same people that are fucking that were funding it, like actually the United States too, because those same psychopaths fund both sides of every fucking war, of every fucking fight, because they benefit from the massacre, suffering, and killing of people, because these people that are actually in charge of the fucking planet, that are trying to fucking consolidate power, that are trying to really just crack down at this moment, they don't care about your country. They don't care about who you are. They don't care about you as an individual. They want power, control, domination, and you are fucking cattle. So shut the fuck up. We're going to brand you, you piece of shit. That's what they're fucking saying. And I'm saying, fuck you, because there's only a few of you and there's many of us. And if we ever recognize that we have more in common with each other than any of these motherfucking psychopaths, we would rise up, break our chains, and break the necks of the people that put yokes on us.
Yep. Absolutely. 100%. Could not agree more. 100% with what you just said. Fun fact, though, about the Civil War. I just want to bring this up before we go. And I know we're already at the 3-hour limit and everything, but we have to do part 2 soon. Definitely, I want to do it again. But fun fact about the Civil War. Jewish slave ships brought the majority of slaves into the South to sell them in the first place. Jews owned most of the slave plantations in the Caribbean and in Latin America. Slavery was made illegal by the Catholic Church specifically because it was the Jewish trade in the Mediterranean, North Africa, and
100%, dude.
Jews owned half of the slaves that were owned in America were from Jewish households in the South. Say, for example, like say, I think it was, what was it? Only 5% of all the Confederates had slaves, right? Like only 5% of the elite upper class, and there were only about 1%, 2% of the Confederates that were Jewish. But of that 5% of the Confederate class, over 50% were Jewish. And so just like today, how many Jews live in America? Almost none. It's like 2 million tops out of 300 million people. How many billionaires are Jewish? One third of all billionaires in America are Jewish. And you're like, where does the power lie? And these super elite members of society, because America always worships money. So it's where follow the money, and you'll always find out who the bad guy truly is. Because let me guess, just by odds, you don't got that money. And if you don't got it, someone else has taken it from you, and it's probably your money to begin with. That's why you get into the taxation idea, what America truly represents and stuff. And I know it doesn't mean taxes. I know we fought a revolution to fight against people taxing without representation. And now I know Americans are paying 40% taxes. I also know, like in the Old Testament, Pharaoh would force the Hebrews in Goshen to pay 20% flat tax on everything, 1/5 of all their goods, and Americans pay 20% sales tax.
Fucking A, brother. All right, man. We are way over. My wife is going to kill me. I got to go. But, man, it's always a fun time talking to you, Tex. Like you said, we're going to have to do this again. I don't even think we even started talking about what we were actually planning on talking about. We started brushing up on it. We started, like, just kind of getting there. So we're going to have to do it again. Brother, tell my audience exactly what's the best place to find you. What's the best place they can support your work, find your work, all that fun stuff?
Because I'm so shadow banned, this is obviously, if you're listening to this in the future and everything, you may not be able to find me where I'm saying I am, but currently Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, X, formerly Twitter. X, that's my social media flagship. You can find me on Instagram on a backup account, but if you want to find all the links, Linktree/beyond Top Secret Texan. Twitter X is at Top Secret Texan, just to tell you that. And you can find my podcast on all the major podcast sites, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple iTunes, all that good stuff. It's on everywhere. I have a website, podpage.com/beyond top secret Texan, to find the episodes there. If you don't want to do the app thing or anything, if you want to find it on a web browser, all the episodes are free. Basically, all the new ones of the last like 2 years are free. Over 400 episodes, and I had over 600 videos on YouTube. I always had the instinct to pitch that, but you can find those videos on Odyssey right now. That's an archive. But check out the podcast. Currently, that's all I'm doing right now is creating the podcast, creating episodes every 2 days, as a schedule. And you can check out the Halloween season right now if you're listening to this live. October is our busy season. We produced over 20 episodes so far. It's one episode per day. All these are full length episodes, all of them covering really thematic, really seasonal, subjects. But I also cover politics extensively, Texas politics specifically, conspiracies of all kinds, military matters, international, espionage, all that good shit. And I approach it from a uncensored, completely experienced way, from an expert's eye. I, will let you guys decide on which you prefer, but all of it's there for you. It's full spectrum, everything from UFOs to the occult to the hidden history of the world to the future and my predictions for it and everything like that. So definitely check it out. It's all, like I said, 400 plus episodes. Most of them are free, all on podcast format. Check it out. Beyond Top Secret Texan. That's the best way to search it up. Beyond Top Secret Texan. It pulls everything up.
Hell yeah, dude. I will include your link tree in the show notes for this, and I appreciate you, brother.
No problem, man. As a pleasure being on. Thank you for having me on. I love talking. Whenever you want to rock and roll again, just invite me on and we'll do a part 2.
Sounds good, brother. All right. Cheers, man.
All right. Peace.